Welcome to this meeting of the Milton Planning Board. It is our 18th meeting of the fiscal year 2016.
Yeah, it was a typo, it was already posted.
What?
It was already posted, I didn't want to, like, I noticed it yesterday, I was like, ah.
We're just ahead of ourselves.
I thought I forgot what year it
Time
was.
really
It
flies.
really does.
Good time work.
Are you having fun?
All right, I'm
have
Alex
a lot of
Whiteside, the chairman, and we're going to introduce ourselves and give any introductory remarks that people may care to do.
Ed Duffy, member. No introductory remarks. Mike Kelly, member.
William Clark, planning director.
Emily Martin, admin.
Tim Serwinski, Assistant Town Planner.
Brian Furs, member.
Emily Ennis, member.
Okay, that's successful. We're going to meet again on the 9th of April. And then we're going to meet again on the 23rd of April. And who knows, we might even meet on the 16th, but it's not scheduled yet. And we hope that we don't meet then. Now, we have 3 sets of minutes. And I've read them. And it takes a while. But they're very complete, I think.
I think we've got 4.
What?
December 10th, December 30th, January 8th, and January 22nd.
Okay, did I look at the 10th? I think I did. 4 sets of minutes. So, we probably should approve these minutes because the public likes to read our minutes, and
Do you want to approve them individually or as a block?
I would like them to be approved as a block. But I am prepared to, whatever the motion is, I think I can handle it.
All right. Well, then I would move that the board approve the minutes of December 10th, 2014, December 30th, 2014, January 8th, 2015, and January 22nd, 2015.
Second.
All right, any discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, good. Now, citizens speak. Are there any citizens who want to speak on something? Oh, we have a citizen, good. Welcome. Let me,
Laura Griffin, I'm a resident of,
okay, let me caution you, Laura, that you're being recorded and televised.
I know, I tell them to keep the camera off. We got all these other handsome people. Okay, I'm here about the a citizens petition, and there's one of these for each of the sign committee, the planning board. There's one of those here. There should be 5. Sorry, does that have pictures with it? That one? Eddie,
Is this one? Oh, this is one
I
package.
think it is one,
are
yes.
there pictures in the
All right,
back of
this is the real test, Laura, if you can get it to go
There are
straight.
pictures in the package, yes.
Everybody's got the pictures.
Yep,
Everybody's got the pictures.
yep.
There we go.
Yes.
I wasn't on my high school basketball team, but not a problem. Okay, just to take a look at those pictures. If you look at the first one, that's an antique clock. People are spending about $100,000 for donations. The next picture, this is Milton Gas. That's actually flashing into a town employee's bedroom window. She won't complain about it, but I did ask her, and she said it's all over the neighborhood. The next picture, if you look at how nice Mr. Chan's is, and then all around it are what have been allowed. If you look at the next pictures, it's what happens when nobody's paying attention. This was the Kennedy Building with 5 or 6 different flashing lights up there before they finally got their sleepy sign. And the last picture is a wooden sign on Quincy's busy Newport Avenue. And the very last picture is a picture of a sign that says Dunkin' Donuts open at 5 o'clock. I mentioned that to Mr. Prondak, and he took it down within a week. I will be mentioning this item from 204 Selectmen and 214 Selectmen. And there you have down here under E, if you look at 2 under E, Selectmen said it's all right. A couple of weeks ago, they said they don't care if signs are at an angle. I don't know if they can do that. November 19th was a Wednesday meeting of the Board of Selectmen. If you look at 9, and it's highlighted, that was the 18-foot sign that's on the Granite Avenue building. And that's all the notice people had, was that. I think there should be public notice. And I think that's it. Oh, and then Nantucket, I don't think we want to go Nantucket's way, but you could take a look at the index for Nantucket's signs. This is my town. This is your town. I'm asking you not only to support this article, but you'll need to doctor it. You'll have to, if you look at the article, it's the last page here. And apparently it should say new backlit, and not, instead of just neon and lead, it should say new backlit or something. But, I mean, that's up to you. New signage is welcome as long as it conforms, as are all municipal signs. I believe, and I am not alone, that recently approved signs at the gateway to Milton, certain business and window signs in our main business district and throughout the town, including a flashing lottery sign, are adversely impacting the quality of our town. Currently, we have large LED signs at 3 of our town's gateways, all approved by selectmen. Supporters will say they're far enough from private property to have little or no effect. I disagree. Milton is now defined by what some call Las Vegas signage at our gateways. Sleepy signs mean we're entering Milton. The law firm sign at the Flatley Building informs those on the highway of Milton's location and competes with the beauty of those using the river. Mr. Whiteside, I know you're interested in the lawn signs and everything, but lawn signs can be pulled down anytime. These signs cannot. These signs, you have to take care of them before they go up. The extra space signs tells drivers they're leaving Milton. And there's now a bank sign shining on the expressway and across Granite Avenue to our business district. You can tell you're in Milton or leaving Milton by all this bright, garish signing. And I don't want you to take my word for it. Take a ride in East Milton Square at night, maybe after you leave tonight. I know you're going to finish up real early. Signage sets the tone, and don't kid yourself, it affects the real estate values in every part of town. It's like a mansion painted beside a rundown shack. Yeah, I live in Milton. I've seen Milton. It's really lively there. The first item on the master plan list is, and I'm not sure I got this right. Are you on the master plan? Is it protect or preserve?
It's close to that, yeah.
What is it, preserve the heritage?
Preserve the historic and physical character is
And that's number 1.
yeah.
That's number 1. Or something like that. That's what we're asking you to do. These signs are laughing at the work and the time that many of our leaders have spent in the past on signage. They are laughing at the many businesses like Mr. Chan's, Fitness Unlimited, Brugger's Bakery, that comply with our town's signage recommendation. This town meeting article is intended to stop approval only of new offensive signage. It does not and cannot apply to signs already allowed. Those encouraged under our sign bylaws are approved already. If it is necessary to include that in the proposal, please do so through an amendment at town meeting. In the past year, selectmen have approved sign after sign and building lights with little to no input from residents. The latest, the 18-foot sign on the Flatley building at 2 Granite Avenue, Selectman Tom Hurley said, "This is the wave of the future, and those traditionalists in town should understand we are in the 21st century." He did say that. One resident asked Selectman that night with the 18-foot sign, "Billboards next." Ironically, the owner of the building with the sleepy sign lives in Norwell. I haven't been in Norwell for a few years, but the last time I was there, the Dunkin' Donuts had a wooden sign. When I was working in Quincy a couple of years ago, city councilors were talking about phasing out some of the bright neon signs in that city on Adams Street, just as we're putting them up on Adams Street. See the sleepy sign on Newport Avenue, it's wooden. I've been south along Route 3A. The minute you cross the line from Weymouth to Hingham, you will know. In Hingham, along 3A, the signs are lit from above in contrast to the backlit neon signs in Weymouth. If you further venture into the shipyard, you'll find 50, maybe more, commercial businesses with our recommended signage. You're not going to see all this stuff. They are all successful, so it is not anti-business to seek conservative signage, tasteful signage. In fact, I think it helps business. When this article was considered by the Sign Review Committee, I taped the meeting. Unfortunately, I loaned my recorder to my granddaughter, and it's in Pennsylvania. I could be wrong, but at no time did I hear committee members recommend holding this off until October. What I did hear were members who had unanimously opposed sleepies and who indicated that certain of the worst signs kind of floated in as grandfathered signs. Members clearly said they would like to see some end to grandfathered signage and see effective code enforcement. The reason for the urgency now is that the 5 months till October, selectmen could approve any number of similar signs. Mr. Whiteside knows that I prepared an article with about 65 signatures for last October's meeting. You learn something new every day. You need 100, and October is a special town meeting. That article, so obviously the article didn't go in. Since October, and this is March, the signs on the expressway have gone up, the big 18-foot sign have gone up. So there is an urgency now. And I said then, in addition, those seeking such signs could claim. So if somebody wants a sign between now and October, those people could claim that we've already set a precedent, and they could have a case. So without a moratorium, these signs could pop up on any business, professional, or commercial venture anywhere in town. I'm sorry, there's another page. Okay. Just 10 years ago, selectmen were traditionalists as well. In 2004, selectmen actually pulled a liquor license from a business whose signs offended them. They also speedily rejected offensive window signs. See October 2004 times. In contrast, this board, without motion, ignored the sign bylaw and encouraged the town planner to allow signs at an angle. That's the piece of the sign bylaw I showed you, at an angle from buildings. Maybe after a committee has studied this, the members and residents will decide they like these signs in atmosphere. If that's so, perhaps town meeting will consider a tax on them. Why not get some money out of it if we like it? And also consider the master plan recommends preserve the character. Consider this. Just this October, our DPW director announced a $1 million grant from Mass Works that will enhance Elliott Street with brick sidewalks and Victorian lights. And also we're getting the 2 Victorian clocks. With this old-fashioned lights and the master plan, it sounds like there's some kind of disconnect in this town. I mean, we either want antique lights or we want neon signs. I can't imagine neon signs and an antique light with the neon sign. It's time to use. It's not just some residents of Precinct 7 or 6. At the Sleepy's hearing, a woman from Reedsdale Road spoke And this quote is from an email sent to me from a resident, I think in Precinct 9. Going through East Milton Square recently at night was disappointing. It's starting to look a little honky-tonk with the backlit signs. I don't want any more and prefer to see the signs gone. Upscale should be the goal in our town. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave.
Don't go off yet, but because this would segue into our next discussion.
And I'm afraid I'm...
Unless there is another citizen out there who wants to speak at citizen speak on a matter other than fair and other than condominium zoning. All right, I don't see any citizens, so stick around.
I was going to leave because I would be tempted to interfere with your discussion.
Well, it's just that
Okay, I
You know,
will stay. I would be happy to stay.
you have
Thank
sort
you.
of prompted this discussion.
Thank you.
But
I
it
hope
does
so.
seem to me, and this is what it seemed to me when I was watching these selectmen on TV, is that this particular article is, in my view, it's a zoning article because you vote to declare a moratorium, which basically says no signs, and the moratorium will extend until such time as the moderator appoints a 5-member committee, which conducts a thorough study, and comes back and some action is taken on their recommendation. And if it doesn't do so, the moratorium would last potentially forever. And in my view, this is zoning at its finest. And the planning board should conduct a public hearing on this. And we should advertise it, and we should get public input.
I agree. I see Mike's nodding his head.
Yeah, I would agree with it. I mean, I think the town meeting asked us to send the sign bylaw that was proposed last October back to the planning board for further study
Right.
for, I think, this coming October. They
I had-
didn't necessarily give us a deadline, but I think it was on our
It's on
agenda
my list of zoning articles that I wanted to bring for October.
for October.
So
I mean, I suppose we could,
Long last.
it's actually relatively long, yeah.
It is a long
Yeah.
last.
so, we could certainly look at a moratorium through October 2015.
But
that would
this
be a
is
modification.
on the
so
warrant now.
I understand, so.
And if we have our public hearing, then of course, we determine
make a
after it what we recommend should be
Understood.
done with this.
So then I would agree.
Yeah.
May I say this, as far as waiting till October?
No, I'm saying you would have it go, the moratorium run through October.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
But we
I
can't make that
wait.
change without a public hearing.
Oh,
Right.
We don't want to, you have been eloquent, but you don't necessarily speak for the town. And the town should have the opportunity to comment, since this is, in my view, a zoning matter, and since the law requires a public hearing before the planning board recommends whatever it recommends, I think that we've got to
Right.
have a public hearing with notice given in the newspaper, and we should probably do it as quickly as we can.
Can we do this on April
Do we have
9th?
enough time to get it in for April
We have
9th?
it already scheduled on the draft agenda for April 23rd.
Okay, because we have to have the 2 weeks' notice. Yep. All right, so April 23rd makes sense.
Yes.
I think we might want to invite Joe Prondak to that meeting. I've talked to him about different signs and this and that and so forth. He says he just cannot keep up with the violations.
I think that inviting the building inspector to our meetings adds a certain gravitas, which
I think it would also be helpful in evaluating what we want to do for the October town meeting, to have people come up and speak about their frustrations or otherwise with signs, and certainly to hear from the building inspector, because that could give us a little bit of a roadmap as to where we want to go.
Great.
let's check the ad with me, because we really do want, well, you have a certain connection with a local newspaper And so the newspaper could put a little blurb in saying that there would be a public hearing on the 23rd about signs. I mean, you'll get the legal notice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
And then the paper could
Actually,
sort of
instead of
set
doing my
up.
work, I did this, so I'll have to do that to them tomorrow. Yeah, I'll get that in next week, yeah. The 23rd?
Yeah, Bill, is your hand up or are you waving?
About that, I think that you need to, if you have this discussion, you should have it with the sign review committee at the same time.
oh, that's a good idea.
Because the technicality behind what signs contain, what they are, and what this article says, kind of goes counter to just basic technology. When you talk about lights, saying that LED lights shouldn't be used, this building primarily runs on LED lights.
That's
true.
Many
many homes run on LED
I
lights.
think that
But I
the
think there's a difference
suggestion
here.
has been made that this needs
I
a
understand that,
little
that's what I'm
bit of
saying.
work.
You
Yeah.
need to
But
have,
there's a difference also between, lighting this building and commercial lighting.
Well, and it's
advertising.
it's backlit versus lit from an external source, which is another matter. So the external source could
is
be
a-
LED,
This
but
is a
not the backlit.
preview of what
Yeah.
we're going to be doing on the 23rd.
and therefore you should have that committee at the same time.
But bear in mind, we can have the committee there so that we can certainly invite the committee, but it really is a planning board hearing on a zoning article. I mean, that's what it is.
But it might be helpful to hear from them if they're having problems with the
Oh,
current
I would be
language.
happy,
Yeah.
I would be happy, we don't have I mean, they can post it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be advertised as a joint meeting, however,
Oh, yes,
because
yeah.
if they, if they can't get a quorum or whatever,
Right.
it doesn't matter, we're
Right,
going to go
exactly.
ahead anyhow.
Yes, yes, agreed.
Yes.
You also are taking and voting on an article that's, what you said isn't what the article is saying. It's a moratorium until town meeting passes what the recommendations are.
Which could go forever,
It could.
because they could never
You could
pass
shut
them.
down
But
all
we
signs.
could also put in, as part of our recommendation to town meeting, a time limit on it.
As long as you're
Yeah, exactly.
extremely careful.
Yes. Are we always
Yes.
extremely careful?
This is, first of all, new backlit, which is what I wanted you to put in. New backlit, not LED signs, the bulbs we have. And also, second paragraph in red, or commercial signs currently allowed under the under the current town bylaws. I mean,
Do we
that's,
have your-
that's actually a duplicate.
You're mixing your stuff
We're
up
not
here.
mixing anything, all we're doing is putting what we've got here.
That is what
This
we're
is
going to
what
have a
we're
meeting.
advertising.
but-
But
this
it's
is what Laura's
exactly
talking
like what we're about to talk, or what you're going to talk about in a few minutes, is that we have a condominium article, and someone has come up with something completely different, and you're going to be discussing something that's completely different. This is what we would advertise. I think
Right.
that this is zoning, and that's what we would
And I
advertise.
agree. We
And then if
started
there
it
were a
today.
recommendation that it be amended to say whatever, then so be it.
Right.
But it would be a recommendation which would come out quite late in the process.
But it
And the
would still
warrant,
be before town
and the
meeting.
warrant committee would probably be extremely
Delighted to have a recommendation.
delighted
prior
to
town meeting.
finally get a recommendation out of the planning board. All right, so,
Thank you.
Great.
you,
Thank you very much.
wait,
Thank you.
can you spend another 2 minutes with
I can
us?
spend an hour, but I don't think you want to
Do we
listen
have
to me.
something to engage the next 2 minutes before I leave you to it?
Well, we could
I know
spend
that,
2 minutes.
I know
to
that
transition.
Mr. First and Emily are interested in more commercial development in
Right.
different, so it's really important that something gets settled here. I mean, if the town wants it, good, let's make some money off these.
I think this planning board has made clear that we want to see the sign bylaws changed.
Yes.
The real sign bylaw.
I think
I
so.
mean, the lawn sign bylaw, I agree. I've seen some ugly things on lawns, I really have. But the fact of the matter is, if you pass that next May, that takes down every sign in the town. I mean, these, once they're approved, they're there.
Yes, that's right. They're grandfathered in when the sign bylaw changes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Can I make one comment to, Laura keeps making the same comment every time about the taxes. Once the sign is on the building, it's part of the building, it's part of the property
It's an
of the building.
improvement, yeah.
It is taxed. It's mixed in with the tax part.
Are
So
we
it's
taxing
already
it
there.
higher? Are we taxing them higher?
Nope, it's part of the business property.
Can we tax them higher than
well,
we do
it's,
the?
however it's assessed.
That would be another
It would
article.
be a business, it's part of the business property, but it would be part of the assessment of the building.
A specific
Because
sign
the
tax
sign
is
is
a new article.
considered a fixture
Right.
as opposed to
I would
a,
assume they have more of a value than a wooden sign, so I would assume they probably do get taxed more.
well,
They
it
would be taxed at
depends.
the higher value of the sign, yeah, I
They
agree.
assess things at my house by value, so I would assume they assess things there by value.
It would depend. Okay, now, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Now, as you recall, last night, thank you for coming in. That was, that worked out very well, didn't it? We had
Did work
a
out quite well.
productive citizen speak, and then we
Are going to segue into the next
we're
thing?
going to go into the next article. Now, as you recall, yesterday, I said that because the amended article would affect the value of my property, I wasn't going to participate as a planning board member, and I'm not going to participate as a planning board member. I will say that I am entitled to participate as a interested resident because that's, the ethics law allows me to do that. But I'm not going to participate as an interested resident tonight. So,
And since this table is a slightly different setup from the other table,
This is the condo hearing.
all right, so the next item on our agenda is the condominium bylaw. And Marion, when we last left this, you were going to look into a few things for us. I believe you'd requested from the moderator whether or not it was going to be within the scope of the article. So come forward and tell us what you found out.
Well, I did email the moderator a few days ago, but about 5 o'clock tonight he called, because I've been calling him. And I also received a forwarded email, more or less at the same time, that was a response by town council. But the moderator said that he would rule an amendment of this nature to be within the scope of the article. And town council said the same thing, but their rationale is that it's so much narrower than the article that was filed, which is a rationale that you could apply to this situation. If you look at the article that was filed, it would apply to the Hillside Street site that this article attempts to address, the amendment attempts to address. It would also apply to many other sites all over town. And that's what people are going to see before town meeting, and they're all going to have notice that there could be an article passed, there could be a vote at town meeting to allow a very broad application of condominium use in a lot of sites and without a great deal of restriction. This article addresses only one, it's designed to address only one site, and if that's not effectively done, then it needs to be fixed, because it's only supposed to. But it also imposes a lot more restrictions on design, size of lots, and it can be further amended in all of those regards. And it says that the article only applies with particular conditions, and designed basically to describe this 13.13 acre site that's on Ford Ranch Road and Hillside Street. So that's the rationale, and that's the response that I've received from the moderator. Now, the moderator makes his rulings at town meeting,
Right.
but he was kind enough to respond ahead of time. And town council had sent an opinion, I think, to the selectmen. I'm not sure who would ask for it, but and then that was copied to me, so I also received that. So the answer is that it would be possible to discuss this amendment as an amendment. It changes the language, it much narrows the article, but it's still about condominium development, and it's much more restrictive as to where it could be applied. I do not really think that there is time, we talked about it last night, to file this as a separate article.
Okay.
And so I think if it's going to be considered, it needs to be considered as an amendment. I think it's worth having more discussion, and I think if the planning board is willing to encourage that, it's productive no matter what, because at least we find out where we stand with this proposal. I would really, I'd urge the planning board to consider, think about it if you need more time, but to consider saying that at least that you want this to go to town meeting, that you approve it to that extent, that you will somehow endorse having the discussion at town meeting. And I think the warrant committee needs to hear from the planning board, and you need to decide whether you think it's worth discussing. I'm sure it's going to be difficult for you to say whether this has a chance of passing right now, because it's a new proposal. You've heard from neighbors, they have some objections. There are things that can be done to improve the language, and there are things that you can do to improve the language that might make it a bylaw that even the developer wouldn't use, which is the way these things go. But that's the situation we're in right now. It's not perfect. That hasn't occurred. That discussion hasn't occurred. It's begun, but it's certainly not complete.
So where that leaves us is last night on the article that's actually on the warrant, the condominium planned unit development. We had gotten to the point where we were going to recommend that gets sent back to the planning board at the Maytown meeting. With this being ruled within the scope of that article, it means that we have a couple of options that we didn't otherwise have. We can continue to say that the article at town meeting should be referred back to the planning board. We could continue our discussions on the amendment that Marion has proposed and come to either a conclusion that we would support it and be the ones to bring forward that amendment. We could say that we would support it but allow Marion to bring that forward, or somebody else, however that works. Or we could also say that, and any of those options could have amendments to the language that she's brought forward, or we could also say that we think that amendment should also come back to the planning board for proposal in October. And I don't think that's a decision we need to make tonight. Because the other one is already in the warrant, it would have gone into the warrant with a no recommendation at this time, which is the usual practice if the planning board hasn't had their public hearing by the time the warrant's gone to press. And so we have between now and really the first night of town meeting to make that decision. It would, of course, be more helpful to the warrant committee and to the town meeting members to know in advance. So I would not wait till the first night of town meeting to make that decision. But we certainly have time at our next two meetings, April 9th and April 23rd, to discuss this and see how we would like to deal with it. So, Brian, you look like you're wanting to ask a question.
I was going to make a comment.
Yes.
So I think this bylaw certainly is less risky from the standpoint that it doesn't involve every single piece of land in the town with very little guidance in the zoning as to what can be developed there. This particular property has been before this planning board on a number of occasions at this point, and this is the second, what I'm going to call very narrow bylaw from a site standpoint that's come before this planning board in my fairly short tenure on the planning board. My feeling is that this board and this town is going to continue to wrestle with these issues and these types of zoning proposals that come forward until we come up with some sort of more general zoning that will give someone some direction as to what we're looking for as a town here, and that would be determined by town meeting. With regard to this specific bylaw, I think a substantial amount of work has clearly gone into it. It has been slightly vetted by the condominium committee, though not fully vetted by the condominium committee. The condominium committee has a fair amount of work that it would need to do on it. and I think based on the nature of the amount of activity that's happened on this site, it would be great to hear from town meeting what the general consensus is about this type of properties, and then also be able to potentially derive some feeling about where the community would be on a general bylaw as we move towards October. I'd very much like to see this bylaw in front of the town meeting for those two reasons. And additionally, I think that it is the type of proposal that this town needs to see more of from a development standpoint, but they have to obviously be done right and done carefully. All of that said, I agree with you that I don't think the decision needs to be made tonight. I think that the condo bylaw review committee is meeting on April 1st again.
I was going to ask.
And
Okay,
I
great.
would recommend that this planning board request comment on the entire bylaw from the condo committee prior to its next meeting on April 9th. So I think that should be a formal request from the planning board to the planning board subcommittee.
Yeah.
I also would,
Recommend that the committee take a look at the article that's going
to
to,
provide its comments back to the planning board.
could we have the committee look at this article as well, or this amendment to the article?
I would say, I'm sorry, my recommendation would be to only look at the amendment and
Oh.
not, they've already voted, the condominium committee has already voted to not move forward with the other one. So that, they've already given their comment on that.
Right.
I'd also strongly recommend that between now and April 9th, the proponent of this bylaw work very hard to meet with the neighbors in the surrounding neighborhood, because I think that will be a very important part of our decision, will be to hear from the affected neighbors. And I think that we would really expect that before we could do much on acting on this. I think the neighborhood insight is obviously a pretty key component of anything that happens here, because it's such a narrow bylaw.
They should also be notified that we're going to discuss it on April 9th, and notified that the condo committee is going to be discussing it, so that they have the opportunity to.
So notified just by flyer, by not
Do we
legal,
have a
not legal
list of
notification,
the,
correct?
Not a legal notification, but do we have a list of the abutters from the last time we had a permit? Do we have email and phone list, or is it, okay, so it's only that.
Can we ask the abutter to do that as opposed to having our planning staff do that, or do we want the planning staff?
We could ask, if we've got a couple of
It's not
abutters.
that many.
Okay, then let's let them know, because I think we really do need to
We'll have
hear
the
from them
planning
on
staff do
this.
that.
I agree that we should make a formal request to the condominium committee to review this and give us their opinion, because that committee has been doing a lot of work on condos, and it would be helpful to have that. So I can make that request
Great.
formally to do that. Any other questions or comments from members of the board?
Just briefly, I concur with the article that's going before a town meeting, that it's, some comments were made last night, it's too broad, and I just don't think it's very effective.
Agree with that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm jumping on some of the points that you made on Marion's amendment. Admittedly, it's very specific to a site, so I'd have to have the input of the abutters as well as other neighbors. It's very specific to a site.
Exactly, yeah, and which is why I don't think we should come to any sort of vote on it tonight. I think we should continue this to the 9th. Have the chance for the condo committee to weigh in on it. Have the chance for the abutters to be notified. Have you have a chance to meet with the neighbors and talk with them about it.
It would be unfair to
Yeah.
try to vote on it without more input.
Absolutely, and that also gives us
Agree
more
with
of a
that.
chance to look at it, because we haven't had, the thing about having citizens zoning articles in front of town meeting is there's, of course, always a chance that town meeting will pass that article. And so if we are to make any sort of recommendation for amendments, we want to make sure that we make the sort of recommendations that mean that if the article, whether an original or the amended form is passed, that it's something that we find is an enforceable zoning regulation. So we should take our pens out and go through it ourselves as well.
I want to second that point. I think in looking at the first submission that's now on the warrant, I found that to be a fairly non-threatening submission. I don't think there was a high likelihood of it passing.
Right.
I'm not opining here in any way about whether or not this will pass, but I think it has a better chance than the first one did. And so to the extent, to Emily's point, that we feel there are things in here we wouldn't want to live with, I think we probably better address them.
Just in the outside chance that this amendment, passes.
If
In
that
the
actually
outside
passes.
chance that we, in the next few weeks, decide that we don't want to recommend passage, but it passes anyway, I would want our pen to have been on it.
Anything else?
I had a
Yeah,
quick
yes.
question. In terms of the original language?
Yes.
The one that's on the warrant, where does that stand as far as the board's concerned? I know that there was a motion to refer
Which
it
has
back.
been
and then-
removed, yeah.
So that's still out there.
That has, that motion has not been brought forward back again. Now, we could do it two ways. We could go ahead and vote on that original one tonight, so that we know, seems pretty clear we don't want that to go forward, so we could go ahead and vote on that tonight, and then vote on the amendment coming back, say, look, we know we don't want this to go forward, we're of multiple minds about the amendment, or we could wait and vote them both at the same time, which actually might be the cleaner way of doing it.
That's the cleaner way to do it.
All right, so then that is going to be on hold, to answer your question.
It's becoming apparent what the opinion is, but
Yeah,
I did make comments. I think we can table them until April 9th.
yeah, I think that would be
I think they were
reasonable.
shared with the planning board, and I also think they were shared with.
And I have a bunch of comments that I have not yet shared with the planning board, so that might be something, if in reading through it, if you have any comments, please send them to Tim and Bill for collection, and then we can look at all of them at the same time. So,
I think we have, do we have a editable version of this? in front of us? Do we have
Yes,
a Microsoft Word
well,
version?
you do actually, because when I do a draft like this, I send it out as a Word document. You can do
Okay.
anything you want
So
to it.
I'll resubmit my
Yeah.
changes in red line then.
Marion, before we
If you
continue
wish-
this.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, before we continue this, do you have
Yes.
anything else you
I
want to
just
add?
wanted to ask that if you're willing to, and you are preparing comments with amendments, if you give them to me, not that I'm going to start a dialogue, but I should take them back to the developer, because I think it's important that the developer and the owner have a chance to review amendments and decide what their position is on them, or whether that they somehow make it impossible. That's what we're going to try to learn in the next couple of weeks.
Fair enough. Now, was anybody here in the audience wanting to speak on the condo article? All right, if not, we're going to continue this to April 9th. At what time? Do we have anything scheduled for April 9th yet?
We do.
All right.
7 o'clock. You have a scenic road hearing at 6:45.
Okay, so continue to April 9th at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if somebody can inform Alex.
I made it 20 minutes.
All right, we did continue it to 7:15, didn't we?
We did, and look at that, it's 7:15, 7:16.
Okay, continued application by their nursery, or perhaps not. But we're going to, it's the Thayer Nursery matter that we are going to continue the hearing in. And we're going to hear from Mr. Corcoran.
Good evening. Ned Corcoran, on behalf of the Oldfield family, their nursery, et al. Let's see, really, a little bit sort of the board's pleasure as to how to carry on this evening. I have some materials that I prepared in response to some of the specific questions that were asked last night. I did evaluate the notion of who is the applicant. And clearly, the initial application, which we would rely on, indicate that Josh and Maggie Oldfield are applicants. But I think also Thayer Nursery Corp. is a co-applicant, because I think Thayer Nursery Corp. is a legitimate successor in interest and has the right to apply for the permit. I think the question, who is the permit applicant, who is the applicant, I think it's the language says that the planning board may grant a special permit for landscape business use on such lot or lots, provided that the applicant or applicants or their predecessors in interest on that date, July 2012, held a special permit. The Oldfields, Josh and Maggie, and their mother held a special permit. Thayer Nursery Corp. is a legitimate successor in interest by reason of essentially a transfer of interest from one to the other. It doesn't, the bylaw doesn't specifically define how a successor in interest is defined. In my opinion, it could be an unrelated third party who may have purchased the rights to develop if they were able to secure a permit. The fact that there was a permit on the property in 2012 is critical. Having said that, Josh and Maggie are the shareholders of Thayer Nursery Corp. It is a closely held family corporation. It is common to the family. And I think it's pretty clear that it has the right to be the applicant in this case. To facilitate a broader issue, to address the concerns about who and what, and how would this applicant or the permit ultimately be defined and judged by for the town. Maggie and Josh are co-applicants with Thayer Nursery, and the leases which currently exist between Oldfield Family LLC and Thayer Nursery Corp. Will be amended. Josh and Maggie will become co-tenants to the property with Thayer Nursery, so that the co-tenants are the applicants, all of the applicants, and all of the tenants are jointly responsible for the obligations under the permit and under the lease, or under the leases. So, with respect to that, I have some redlined materials. I have not identified in this specifically that the leases would be amended. That would be that is an action that will have to take place. They have not yet been amended. We will do that before the April 9th meeting. But I do clarify, one, that Josh and Maggie are, so let me pass out what I have here and explain what I have. So basically what I did was a handful of things, really in response to some requests from the board last night, but I did, with respect to the narrative, do two things. One is a red line first page, which just adds clarification that Josh and Maggie are co-applicants to Thayer Nursery Corp. Within the body of the text. Their names appear and are signed as applicants on the town's application form. That is the only change that I make to that first section.
And it makes sense that you did that, because even though there is the 67 permit goes to the individuals and says it's not to be assigned, and we don't want to grant a permit to some entity other than the entity that has the nursery permit, because that would be an invitation to confusion.
I mean,
We want to make sure there's a continuity, that everyone who's doing anything on the property can be identified as within the same group.
Did we look into or find out if we could have town council review that?
Review what?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to get into all the legalese, but I,
Review, well, I mean, what,
the application and the applicants, that they're proper. I've listened to it, it says you have to have held a special permit in 2012. Did their nursery corp hold a special
well,
permit?
but he is now saying that the applicant will be the applicants listed on page 1 of the application, and that page 2, look at page 1, it's the handwritten page, in the book.
Oh. In my mind, this doesn't have bearing on the discussion of whether a special permit would be granted. It's more, I think, and I don't want to put words in Mr. Dunn's mouth, but I think he was warning us of future
Well,
legal implications.
there may be legal implications, but if the people who hold the 67 permit are the same people, I mean, the children of the Oldfields are listed in the 67 permit, and so if the children of the Oldfields apply for the special landscaping permit, it seems to me that they're on as strong a legal footing as they can be on. And I don't think we need ask town council about that. We may, we may run into town council matters, and certainly we're going to hear from Mr. Dunn, and he can attempt to persuade us otherwise, and maybe just to put this one to as much to bed as we can. Mr. Dunn, why don't you come and
Again, my intention is not to slow the process down, affect the permit in any
It's to
sense.
make
My
it-
intention
it's
is
to
to
make
make
it
sure
go.
it's clean when we're starting.
I agree, and I personally think that having Maggie and Josh as the applicants here makes it clean.
Okay. Your opinion means something to me.
All right, well,
Alex, just a quick question before Mr. Dunn speaks. To the extent that a permit is held but not being used, is there an expiration period? I'm just concerned about who is actually operating under that permit, and I want to make sure on the same basis that
Under
we
the
understand.
67 permit?
Or the 87 permit, I guess.
Or the
because
87 permit.
adjusted it, and
the 67 as updated
as
in
updated in
87.
87. So obviously, they had a permit. The question is, if they were operating as their nursery illegally, does it,
Well, I mean, the permit holders are Maggie and Josh, as far as I can tell. Isn't that right, Ned?
Yeah, and that permit is clear. It
Yeah.
must be they who are.
and were they operating, was it Maggie and Josh operating under that permit on the date in 2012, is my question.
As far as I know, yes. Their nursery corp entered into a lease of the property in 2013 or 14. It was somewhat after that.
Okay.
Now, what does that mean relative to who's operating the permit today?
Well, I'm not asking,
That's a
that's
question.
irrelevant to me because it's based on who held it in 2012 and if it was in existence. Okay, thank you.
But you're going to, I think, say that they're operating the permit today.
They are the
They
holders
are,
of the
they are the
permit.
permit holders, and they would be operating, since no one else can operate the permit.
Understood going forward, that I understand. My key is who's operating it on the date required in 2012.
2012, it
There was
was
no
Maggie
lease in
and Josh.
place, so it was Maggie and Josh. That was my question. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, now, what does this say to you, Mr. Dunn?
I'm still at a loss as to what application, is this a new application, is this another new application? I mean, because now it's a new applicant, right? So if there's a new applicant, then it's a new application, and that triggers notice requirements, I think. And I don't think you can just change the name of the applicant and proceed under, like nothing has happened. That's just my preliminary view.
They are the applicants.
Well, that was withdrawn, wasn't it? I thought we agreed to that yesterday.
No, if you look at your booklet, did you get a booklet? If not, you should ask Mr. Corcoran to give you one.
I have it,
The-
But it's, I mean,
Well, the
listen,
first-
I
The
can't,
first page says they're the applicants.
right.
List
and
them
that
as
app-
applicants.
And that application was dated, right, October 21st of 2014, which was withdrawn, it's my understanding, with the submission of the new application. And now we're submitting another application.
Well, it's my understanding this is a revised application.
With new applicants.
No, with the same applicants.
Okay. So just so I know, because the goalposts are really changing here
All right.
rapidly. I
But
mean, they're moving.
let's just, they say Maggie and Josh are the applicants. The application says Maggie and Josh are the applicants, and the documents, it's a revised application that we're having a new hearing on. They didn't pay a new fee for it, it's just a revised application, and we're having
So we'll pretend that the application that they submitted on the 10th doesn't exist? Is that what we're doing?
it's going to be superseded by the revised application.
So just so I'm straight, the application that was submitted on October 21st was superseded by the application that was submitted on March 10th, which is now being superseded by the application that is being submitted on March 26th.
It's
Is that
being
right?
revised slightly to make clear who the
They were
applicants
not
are.
part of the special permit, so they didn't hold it.
I mean,
2012.
it seems to me that that's as good as we can get, and it isn't bad.
Well, and this sort of goes to the point I was making yesterday initially,
It was held as special permit.
and I'm sorry to put it in these terms, but on our end, the goalposts are continuing to move here. And it's difficult to understand who the applicant is, what they're proposing. I mean, I can guess what they're trying to say now, but, you know,
Whoever,
you would think that an applicant would come in before this board with their ducks in a row and not saying, we propose we're gonna do this with regards to the corporation, and this is how we're gonna do it. I mean, what if they don't do it? I mean, this is pure speculation. They're supposed to have.
you raised a good point, and it seems to me that it's been addressed.
They canceled their nursery.
With something that's going to be done at some future date. I mean, even with all that, it's,
We want there to be continuity of interest in the nursery operations and whatever agricultural operation there is. We want this permit, if we issue one, to control. And we don't want people saying, oh, well, their nursery isn't bound by this. We want, if we issue a permit, we want it to control what happens on that property. And it appears legally best that Maggie and Josh be the applicants.
okay. Now, I'll spin that out to its logical conclusion. And, you know, like I said at the very beginning, I didn't write the 1967 special permit, I didn't write the 1987 special permit, and I didn't write the bylaw amendment. All I can do is read what they say, and you don't have to be a lawyer to read the very simple words that the documents say. The bylaw amendment, and I'm sorry to reiterate this, but there's two requirements. That a landscaping business was being operated on the property, that the applicant or the applicant's predecessor in interest held a special permit at that time. No one disputes, I guess maybe now it's disputed, that Fair Nursery Corporation, I mean, are we really going to sit here and say that Fair Nursery Corporation was not operating Fair Nursery on the property in July 2012? I mean, that's really bending the realms of reality here. I mean, everybody knows that Fair Corporation was operating on the property at that point, right? I mean, even the documents that were submitted by Fair Nursery Corporation show that they held a leasehold interest in 2009 on the property. I didn't submit those documents. They submitted those documents. And now to pretend that date that's in their application materials doesn't say 2009, now it says 2012, that's not what it says. Fair Nursery Corporation was operating on the property, not Josh and Maggie Oldfield. So Josh and Maggie Oldfield hold the special permit rights, but they weren't operating on the property, right?
Well, they were on the property, and they were operating.
Their Nursery Corporation was operating.
Well, I understand that.
They
but
were working for
there.
Fair
They were
Nursery
there, and
Corporation.
they were doing stuff. The question, I mean, you raise an interesting point, whether or not they illegally transferred or unlawfully transferred the 67, 87 special permit, the rights under it to their nursery, which of course they couldn't do. So, but if you think of it, since they couldn't transfer the rights to their nursery, they had to have been the operators.
Or at least the holders. And that went back to my question, is if they're not operating, but they hold the permit, does the permit go away?
Yes.
No.
It expires. I mean, I didn't read 40A. I didn't write 40A either. If you don't use it, you lose it. That's the law. And they weren't
But
using
look,
it.
look, the permit was being used because there was a nursery operation going on there continuously. In fact, that's why
Maybe-
we're here.
All right. I mean, I don't know what to say.
All
I mean,
right.
if this, you know,
They're
the
going to
sky is
be-
green in this world, then the sky is green. I can't change that.
They're going to be the applicants.
Okay. So if the end game here, if you just follow me, right? If the end game is, if Josh and Maggie Oldfield
Yeah.
are the applicants,
You know,
how does their Nursery Corporation, how do they operate? Is there a transfer of the special permit rights to their Nursery Corporation? I mean, I don't get it.
all right. Mr. Corcoran, explain.
No, not in that case. There will be the operation, well.
You
Maggie-
don't have, I mean, you can think about this.
Maggie and Josh will be the permit holders. I would suggest that the permit could also be written to the corporation, because the corporation is a related entity to them.
And then we would, I mean, I think that they could be an applicant.
And it
But
can-
I do think that Maggie and Josh have to be applicants also.
agree.
But, so you want their nursery and Maggie and
I am
Josh to
saying
be
that-
the applicants?
Yes, so I am saying that the applicants are Maggie and Josh and their nursery corp. I mean, it's all related. They're related entities, the
They-
people involved.
they own it.
It's, I mean, let's cut through other stuff here. It is a family-operated business that's been operating on this property for 50 years. No one-
Is it a subchapter S?
It is a corporation. I don't know, I don't know the answer to that question, whether it's a subchapter S or whatever. But it is a family-related business. You have a family-related LLC that owns the land. You have a family-related corporation that is in business to operate. And you have individuals that hold the permit, and they are all intertwined with each other. The bigger question from my perspective, for Maggie and Josh, is more of a, personal liability question. If they are the holders of the permit and the operators of this, are they properly insured if there's something that the corporation does while operating the property? That's an insurance risk question. But from the town's perspective, from the neighborhood's perspective, the question is, who is it? It's Maggie and Josh. It's their business. It's their business operating on that property. The family owns the property. The family owns the business. They are combined in this situation. I think we're reading an awful lot of other detail into what is a fairly generally written piece of the bylaw. The bylaw is not very specific in terms of what and how things are.
No, but we don't want to do something in a vacuum. And we have the 67 permit and 87 permit updating it. And we don't want to act as though those aren't still out there and in effect and in fact binding on the people they were issued to, because in my view, they are in effect and binding. And so we want to make sure that this permit, that, as Mr. Dunn points out, that these few ducks are in a reasonable line. And I think this is the way to do it. Do members of the board object to having Thayer Nursery as an applicant?
Well, it's, on the application that I'm looking at from October 21st, it says Maggie and Josh Oldfield.
Right.
Those are the applicants.
That's what it says.
And then the rest of the page, when it goes down to...
And then the
that's
next
narrative.
page, they say someone else is the
But
applicant.
I see the next follow-on pages is just a narrative, and that
Well,
this is the actual application.
Well, no, the whole thing is the application.
I see it, I know it says Josh Baggy, and it would seem to me, and maybe, again, you can interject the legal ramifications, but it would seem to me that the bylaws, with its predecessors and everything, wants it to literally be, to get to my point, stand in the family more or less. And to give the corporation an the permit
Right,
means
they
I
could
could
sell
sell the
it.
corporation,
Right,
now
exactly.
it gets the permit with it.
Well, we could.
Where I don't think the bylaw wants that to
I
happen.
think that you've got a,
Josh can't sell Maggie and she can't sell, but you could sell a corporation and give them the
but the
special
planning
permit
board,
with it, if they were on the
planning board can restrict the special permit, the transferability of the special permit. You know, they can say, this is only good to the holders, to the applicants, and if you want to assign it,
But
you've
but
got
again,
to...
if the applicant's the corporation and you sell the corporation, then they can,
Well, you've got
they
a,
can take the
you've
permit.
got a point.
I think I prefer the
I think it's
applicant.
best that the application is just mash, Josh, Maggie,
I
Oldfield.
would,
When this-
I would
And it
agree
is.
with that.
When this permit was, I would agree with that as well. When this permit was written in 1967, the business, according to the advertisements that were submitted, was running as their nursery.
Right.
So was
I
it,
think it was in also, no,
A DBA.
DBA.
okay, so it wasn't an, it
When did
wasn't
it
a
stop being
corporation.
a DBA? You don't know?
Can I just ask a question? So let's say that you're proceeding with Maggie and Josh as being the applicant,
Yeah.
right? How, and again, you can imagine any which way you want, but Thayer Nursery Corporation is going to resume operations on the property. The permit goes to Maggie and Josh.
Right.
Okay? How does Thayer Nursery legally operate on that property without, they won't have a special permit, and
They'd be an-
there's a
they'd be
preliminary
an-
injunction
they'd-
prohibiting them from
They'd be a
operating on the property?
contractor. They'd be a contractor.
I mean, they hire other people to work there.
So Maggie and Josh would hire Thayer Nursery? to
Yes,
work?
you've got it.
Yeah. And they are. Corporation.
I think
Except,
that,
except Thayer Nursery is actually the leasehold, has a leasehold interest in the property. I mean, we're creating a fiction upon a fiction upon a fiction here, and
what we're trying to do is get on with it. Let's just, I think that if Maggie and Josh were the applicants, that would be a good thing, and keep their nursery out of it. And keep it as listed in the application. And if you have a problem with that after mulling it over, then I'd let us know, and we'll consider it further. But
so are the Oldfield Family LLC and Thayer Nursery Corporation now not applicants? Is that what we're talking about here? Because it says it on this app.
we get to ask the applicant.
The board has indicated that they would prefer it if Maggie and Josh were the applicants.
Which again, I think they are in the application. If I look at this as the
As
application.
listed on the application.
Right.
We like the.
This is the
We like
application.
the way the
Yeah, Oldfield family
application
is
is.
the owner.
And putting other applicants on it is, I mean, if you really come up with a problem, let us know. But if you can work with this, do so, because it's better.
We can certainly work with that.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Dunn, let's, you've got the names of the applicants.
Josh and Maggie.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Now, we're going to leave the name of the applicant and go on to the next point, which was you were going to give some thought about describing for the board how you would break down the operations between a nursery business under the special permit and an exempt agricultural business under General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 3, and the business operations which would be conducted by the landscaping business.
So basically what I did was I didn't redline so it wouldn't show up as a whole lot of redline, but I took sections 2 and 3 of the narrative, and I basically took all of the operations from section 3 and moved them into section 2. You're shaking your head, Emily.
I'm shaking my head because it's still not correct.
My intent is that all of the operations, landscaping service, snow and ice management, firewood sales, Christmas tree sales, and essentially the physical operation of the nursery would be within the four corners of the permit. The permit would apply essentially to the operation of the...
Exclusive landscaping activities.
Here's the problem, is in paragraph 2 of the zoning, it does not authorize us to do a special permit for the nursery operations. It only authorizes us to do the landscaping, the firewood, the snow removal, the Christmas trees, and the holiday materials. The nursery has to remain under the Board of Appeals special permit. So it needs to be in 3, not 2.
Okay. I will, the intent was to...
But what that means is the mulch sales and the other things that currently occur under the nursery, you either have to decide of all, we're going to take mulch as an example, but there's certain overlap between what's going on in the landscaping and what's going on in the nursery. So you have 2 choices. You can either move that overlap to one or the other, probably the landscaping, or you can say mulch sales at X level will be on the nursery, mulch sales at Y level will be on the landscaping. But the trouble is, for your client, is that anybody coming in to inspect that is going to have to inspect it at a different level. So if all the mulch sales are under landscaping, for example, it makes it easier to inspect.
But they will be presumed to be, all the mulch sales will be presumed to be under the landscaping. Even
That has to be in 2,
right,
yes.
but that is, but this is I mean, the problem is, of course, that the nursery says, Josh gets up early one day at 5 and he jumps in his Bobcat and he loads up a load of mulch for the nursery at 5 a.m. and some neighbors complain about this. And he said, well, that was just the nursery that we were doing, or that was our agricultural business. And we don't...
Well, that's where the hours have to come in,
We
too.
don't
Yes.
want... We have read the problem we have is that it was pointed out at an earlier time that the statute says that the permit issuing authority, that people can complain to the permit issuing authority about non-compliances with the permit. So we want, if we issue a permit, we want it to be a tight permit, and we don't want people coming in and saying, oh, well, that wasn't part of our landscaping business, that was something else. We want, if there is something that just is totally outside of the realm of landscaping. I mean, mulch is the essence of landscaping, and so mulch sales should be part of the landscaping business. But if there is something that is clearly outside of, and planting trees, that can be landscaping, planting shrubs, delivering materials, all that can be landscaping. And we don't want people coming in and saying, oh, well, that was not part of the landscaping, that was nursery. Don't want that to happen because we've seen what's happened with the current permit. We've got 5 Superior Court cases, and how many references to the building commissioner? A ton of them. If we issue a permit, we want everyone to, we want it to be we really want it almost to be self-executing.
Understood. And I think that's clearly what the Oldfields want as well. They want a very simple, clear cut, this is
Right.
what it is. And it's simplest, I think, I will evaluate and we can consider with the board what, clearly what elements of nursery aren't regulated by this permit. I'm not sure what they would be. I think the hours of operation would be regulated by the permit. I think the deliveries of materials, I mean, if you've got a truckload of shrubs that are coming in to be planted on the site, you don't want them to say, well, that truck can come in at 6 o'clock because that's a nursery.
But I think that's what
delivery.
we're looking for. So to keep the tree reference alive, how many trees is too many trees for a nursery operation? Is selling one tree on a Sunday a nursery operation where selling 3 isn't? I think we need the applicant to make that decision and present it to the planning board, and the planning board can decide whether we agree with your estimate. But it seems like that would need to be clear.
And it's, we'll try to be clear. It's extremely difficult to be clear.
Which is the problem the building inspector has.
We can be So basically, we understand, we want to make
Introduce
everything.
yourself for the viewing audience. Be advised that you're being recorded.
Yes, so I'm Maggie Oldfield, 237 Hillside Street. We understand, everyone wants clarity, as do we. And that's one of the reasons kind of where we positioned and relayed out everything. So when, if ever anybody wants to come and inspect, all of the mulch and all of our bulk materials sort of be in one area. So we understand to get something, you have to give stuff up. And we understand that certain parts of our operations are protected usage, certain materials are protected usage. And so we're willing to make things easier and have one quantity for both aspects of our business. So if Prondak comes up, he can easily see and judge and quantify. And I think it's easier if its quantities are the same no matter the product, so he can visually see the levels, like a do not exceed amount, and he can come up and take a look, and wherever those products go during the day, if it goes to our nursery to mulch in our trees, that's fine. If it goes to your house and you install it, that's fine, because to me, that's not landscaping. Landscaping to me is you hiring us to install, or a landscaping job. So we have these piles, and it's one quantity. And our hours of operation are pretty much laid out. Again, I know we're allowed under the nursery to have deliveries at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., but our intent is not to. Our intent is to have the hours 7 to 6, Monday through Friday, 8 for open for business, 7 to 6, Monday through Friday, Saturday 8 to 5. No landscaping activities happen on Sunday, but understand that we have the right, if you come in to buy a tree and you have a truck, as a nursery operator, I should be able to use a Bobcat to load a tree into the back of your truck. I understand that outgoing deliveries are a problem on Sunday, but we are still a seasonal business. Most of our activities happen on weekends. And I understand that restricting possibly outgoing deliveries from 10 to 3, which are, the hours are outlined here, perfectly fine with that. If someone comes in at 9 a.m. to buy a tree to get loaded into a truck, I kind of have a little problem with that, because under this, it says I can't start a Bobcat to 10. I have a problem with it, but if it's gonna break it, I'll wait to 10. I don't want to, because they could go up to my competitor and buy it at 8.
So then section 2 in here is going to say that the storage of materials are under this permit. But section 3, which is just a description of the other businesses that are happening, business activities that are happening on the site and don't go into the special permit, would refer to Thayer Nursery growing, nourishing, et cetera, managing fruits and vegetables. So the things that we authorize that actually go into the physical special permit will be under 2. Anything that comes under the nursery businesses that's not ours or storage or whatever goes under 3. Anything under the agricultural exemption that remains under there goes under 3.
I'm not sure I understand what you said, but
Me, what I said?
He totally understood you, it's me.
I think that I would like you just because I, spend my time reading General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 3, and it's pretty hard to understand. But I gather that you have cracked the issue and understand what you're entitled to do without any regulation from the town.
I feel like,
But not what you feel, what the law
what?
allows you.
My interpretation of the
But
law.
your interpretation of the law.
As I understand it, is there are certain protected uses that goes with farming. And I believe that there is a question as to what is farming. And Mike brought it up last night. You do not have to start anything from seed to be a farmer. The key words in farming is maintaining, nourishing, and managing. It means that I have to take possession of the plant material and actually care for it.
I've got the statute, why don't I read it?
It's in your book.
General Laws, Chapter 128, Section 1A. Farming or agriculture shall include farming in all of its branches, and the cultivation and tillage of the soil, dairying, the production, cultivation, growing, and harvesting of any agricultural, floricultural, or horticultural commodities, the growing and harvesting of forest products upon forest land, the raising of livestock, including horses, the keeping of horses as a commercial enterprise, the keeping and raising of poultry, swine, cattle, and other domesticated animals used for food purposes, bees, fur-bearing animals, and any forestry or lumbering operations performed by a farmer who is hereby defined as one engaged in agricultural or farming as herein defined, or on a farm as an instant to or in conjunction with such farming operations, including preparations for market, delivery to storage, or to market, or to carriers for transportation to market. And so that's what farming or agriculture is defined as.
And that is obviously very clear. It's so clear that there are a lot of activities before the Superior Court determining what's what. So I think it is appropriate, more appropriate for us, the way I interpreted the preparation of this bylaw and what we're applying for is that the town's going to regulate under a permit the activities that occur on this property to the protection of the neighbors. And I don't know how to do it any other way. I don't want a scenario where we've got conflict over what you can do under one permit or over another.
I understand
I don't think
that.
that operates to anybody's benefit, including the owners.
Well, I understand that, but I'm looking at the way it's written, and you've got under 2, nursery. Thayer Nursery grows, nourishes, maintains, and manages fruits, vegetables, berries, ornamental plants and shrubs, flowers, et cetera, et cetera. That's all stuff that is not governed by paragraph 2. However, you go down about 5 or 6 lines, and it says the nursery services include the sale of agricultural and earth materials that include compost, soil, mulch, stone, masonry projects. That goes under the landscaping. The next one, tools and equipment that are needed for tending after a garden or landscape. Firewood goes under the landscaping, but the tools and equipment isn't under the landscaping. All I'm saying is 2 needs to be absolutely specific to what we're going to authorize in the special permit. And if it's not going to be authorized in the special permit based on paragraph 2 of the zoning that town meeting passed last year, it shouldn't be in section 2.
I think why it's in section 3 is because we can sell it for pickup. We can sell it for small quantities for pickup if you come to the site. So that's why I think it's a bit reiterative and it's in there. But I understand, as far as the special permit goes, that you want it all.
I'm less,
the other.
yeah, I'm less concerned about what's in 3, just because that doesn't move forward to the special permit. It's just a description of the other businesses that are there, but I'm very concerned about what's in 2, because that's what moves forward.
Yeah.
We will keep moving.
All right. Ed?
A question, Mr. Chairman, about, I'm not aware that we're making any progress here, but at the end of last night's meeting, a lady stood up and said that she has some very grave concerns about encroachments upon her property, and she was on the verge of being emotional about it. Can we tell this lady that we will address her concerns tonight or next meeting or whenever? But I don't, that was the last piece of business last night. I don't hear anything about it today.
Well, my intention is to get the public comments. We had a question on the floor about what the activities on the site were. We attempted to get some clarification of that issue tonight, and you're right that we didn't make a great deal of progress, but there's no harm in trying. What we're going to do, if you look at your zoning, and this is after we get our general public comments, we're going to go through 4, A through S, individually. And we're going to take the application, and we're going to read the zoning, and we're going to read the proposed plan, and we're going to comment on the proposed plan. And the concerns that the abutter expressed are going to be able to be covered probably under several of those plans. But we're not writing a permit right now. We're taking comments on the application, and then we will discuss whether or not we will discuss where we're going, and that is the way I intend to proceed with this, and it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of time, but I do want to get the general comments on the application down first, and I understand if I could wish that it would go faster, I would wish it, but
I wish we could just assure the lady that she has not been forgotten.
we haven't forgotten you. Okay?
I'm not sure.
Well, I have.
She's satisfied.
No, we understand that there are abutter concerns here.
Thank you.
And that we want to, we're not going to ignore them. This is not an easy task. Okay. Who else would like to be heard on this application? We have, I think that we have completed the request that we made for more clarification for the time being. I mean, the matter is still somewhat unclear, but as we get into the specifics, we may be able to flush out some more details. Mr. Joe Henning, you want to be heard, and come up. And you probably, you other people can leave the table for the, so that he has the entire floor to himself.
I'm Phil Johanning, 23 Parkwood Drive. I'm not sure why we're getting into the Dover Amendment. As Mr. Dunn said last night, this has never been an issue. We have Mr. Leonard, Mrs. King, and Mr. Hurley, who are all attorneys. Mr. DeLuna, who is the attorney for Thayer Nursery and for the Oldfields, came before the board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, all attorneys. He made the argument about the Dover Amendment, and they stopped it. They said that they weren't going to listen to that because the primary use of the property was not agricultural. Then we've gone before Judge Broussard, Judge Davis, Judge Wilson, Judge Garsh, and the same arguments were made and the same arguments were stopped. So why do we want to introduce this obfuscation into this this application? It doesn't make any sense to me. It seems to me that you're perpetuating the issues that have gone on way too long. If you look at the property, it's 5 acres. And a lot of the property is taken up by residential use. If you look at the economics and you say, okay, the primary use must have something to do with how money is made. So you look at the product sold. 1,000 cords of wood will generate between $550,000 and $1 million, depending on how it's sold. If it's sold by the quarter cord, it'll be $1 million. If it's sold all in cords, it'll be $550,000. Somewhere in the middle, we're coming to where the number actually is. I think it's 800,000. Just me. Actually, if you look on Thayer's website, they sell stands and smaller quantities of wood for higher prices. So it could get close to $1 million. If you look at $1 million of revenue from firewood, it seems to me that firewood has to be near the top of the list. But if you say that landscaping is a bigger money earner, then maybe you say they make $1.2 million in landscaping. So if selling a couple of trees gets them, let's say, $200,000, the primary use is not growing and selling trees. The primary use is probably landscaping.
Or wood
firewood.
sales. But
Yeah.
what you're suggesting is that under the Dover Amendment, which does require the primary activity produce the most dough, I think. In any event, you're suggesting that landscaping and wood sales accounting for more than 50% of their sales make it very unlikely that there would be a Dover Amendment argument.
Protection. And so I believe we can't look at those things. We have to consider everything on the property to be commercial.
Well, those aren't Phil's numbers. There was an affidavit submitted by Maggie to the ZBA as part of this process, and I think it was also submitted in one of the court proceedings that talks about the amount of revenue that's generated by each business. And that was a material factor in the judge's decision when he was ruling on granting both the town the preliminary injunction against Thayer, and in denying Thayer's application for a preliminary injunction to stay the ZBA's decisions. So, I think that what the issue is that if the Dover Amendment applies to a particular use within Thayer Nursery, it doesn't cover all the activities that are going on there. It's never been read that expansively.
Well, we did ask what use the Dover Amendment covered, and we haven't been given an answer to that question as of yet.
I guess I gave it, and that's zero.
You said, yes, and.
And I'm up here to comment as a citizen, and
No, I
that's my thought.
understand. It just seems to me that the Dover Amendment may not be, as far as this application is concerned, I don't see that there is any mention of the Dover Amendment in the application.
Having been before Wilson, Broussard, Davis, and none of them accept this, none. You know, I have to say that most of us are not attorneys, so we have to look at judges who are in that realm, and they don't buy it.
I don't think.
So should we? No.
I don't think we are.
No, I don't think anyone here is looking to hide behind the Dover Amendment. I personally was happy to get an explanation of the Dover Amendment just because I don't know anything about it. And so I was happy to have some background on it tonight.
Right.
It doesn't, personally speaking, it doesn't affect my decision about what happens here because I see it as something completely different. I think we're working on this. If they're trying to use Dover Amendment to say something else, that they can do something else. That's outside of my purview as far as I'm concerned. That's a matter for what you're dealing with right now in the courts.
That's why we're trying to get them to specify what it is that they want to be included in the special permit if we grant it, so that that is very specific to the requirements of the zoning.
That's actually a very good segue into what Phil and I and John wanted to bring up, and that has to do with the fact that there's and again, these are requirements of the bylaw amendment. You know, we had no say in them, but the bylaw amendment talks about creating essentially a 2012 baseline for the size of activities on the property. And so, you know, what I'd like to do is just basically address the portion of my memo, which is section B on page 3. It talks about how.
Well, one thing, Mr. Dunn, why don't you introduce yourself again?
All right. Matthew Dunn. I'm an attorney. I represent Philip Joining and John Rowe, who are butters to Thayer at 23 Parkwood Drive.
This is the January memo?
This is the, the March 23rd memo.
And which section was it again? I'm sorry.
Page 3, section D.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Captain, applicants have still presented no evidence to as to the extent that their July 2012 baseline activities. And I'll read it just for the benefit of the people who don't have a copy. As specifically stated in the bylaw amendment, the activities for which the planning board can authorize by special permit under the bylaw amendment are expressly limited only to those which were conducted in 2012, and that's found in section 2 of the bylaw amendment. Moreover, the bylaw amendment restricts the size of those activities to a level no greater than the level of that activity existing in 2012, unless there is a reliable showing that a greater level would be consistent with the purpose of this subsection and cause no adverse effects on abutters or nearby residents. So, sort of as a prerequisite, you have to figure out what was the 2012 level of activity, because that's the only way you're going to be able to gauge whether they're in conformity with what the bylaw requires, and that is to restrict the activities to what they were in 2012. So first you got to figure out what they were in 2012. The bylaw amendment does not allow any applicant to introduce any new activity on its property and expressly limits the existing activities to the level at which the applicant was conducting them in 2012. Although Mr. Joenning and Mr. Rowe pointed this requirement out at the public hearing before this board on January 8th of 2015, sorry, that says 14, should say 15, Thayer still has not supplemented its application with any information concerning the size and scope of its retail sales, including its farmers markets and other special events, and commercial landscaping, construction, snow plowing, and firewood sales business on the subject property in 2012. As previously stated, without this baseline information, which is required under the bylaw amendment, it would be impossible for the planning board to determine the appropriate size and scope of the commercial activities that Thayer Nursery seeks to undertake on the subject property under the special permit that's at issue now. This in turn would defeat the stated purpose of the bylaw amendment, which is to limit these commercial activities to a level no greater than the level that the activity existed in 2012. The most accurate means to establish what the baseline level of activity was on the subject property in 2012 is for Thayer Nursery to supplement its application with inventory, sales reports, or other accounting records for each line of business that it conducted on the subject property in 2012. These figures can then be verified by an independent accounting firm against Thayer's 2012 tax returns. After this baseline is set, which will reveal the size and scope of Thayer's commercial activities on the subject property in 2012, Thayer should be required to submit the same information to the planning board on an annual basis in order for it to prove that it is not operating at a greater level than the 2012 baseline. This is consistent with the purpose of the bylaw amendment.
Well, you suggest a form of evidence that Thayer might produce, but what they have to produce is satisfactory evidence of the 2012 level. In other words, evidence that the planning board feels is sufficient to establish the level. And it doesn't necessarily have to be tax returns, and they've we will ask them to describe what their methodology is on doing this, and we'll see if we think it to be adequate. But you raised the point that the 2012 level has to be reliably established.
Correct, right. And right, I mean, you're right. What I've suggested would probably be the most accurate way to determine that. It's not the only way to determine that. So, the information that's been provided to date, from my reading of it, is insufficient to figure out what was going on there, what the levels were in 2012. I mean, just with regards, for an example, the snow plowing aspect of the application, there's two invoices that really make very little sense to me. One is to an entity that's in Dover, New Hampshire, and the other entity, it provides snow plowing services to residential people already. They're snow plowing a snow plower. And, I need some sort of explanation as to how that demonstrates that they were operating a snow plowing business on the property in July of 2012. I mean, that's the type of insufficient information that's been provided to this board, that you can't form a baseline of the 2012 activities from. You just can't. So, that's one part.
Okay. What is the level? We have that. We understand that the bylaw requires that we know what it is. Right. I mean, we have to determine what that level of activity is.
So, all right. So that's my point on the baseline. We had talked about yesterday there was a lot of talk about the drainage plan. In its current form, it's not. There's three requirements of the bylaw. It says the bylaw requires Thayer Nursery to show that the drainage measures will not cause adverse drainage impacts on the neighbor's property. As Mr. Jowenning and Mr. Rowe talked about and demonstrated with photographs of the board, and I understand no special permit has been issued yet, but what they've done to date has actually made the conditions on their property worse than it's ever been. I mean, there's a drain that drains into their yard, into their property, and causes property damage. So something needs to get done with that. One of his the drainage measures will not increase water flows onto neighboring properties. I just talked about that. Will not create ponding on neighboring properties. That's sort of all along the same line. All this stuff is happening right now, and that this needs to be addressed. That's our position with regards to the drainage plan. And it sort of raises a broader issue as to, with regards to the site improvements, and that's just sort of cast a wide net over what's being proposed. Will those be completed? Will those need to be completed before Thayer reintroduces the activities onto the property, or is that something that's going to be an ongoing basis? Because there's no carrot for Thayer to do these things, and in all due respect, they've had substantial compliance issues in the past, and it's very well documented, and it's been spoken about at length to this board. So, if this is going to happen, the requirements that we're talking about here need to be put in place beforehand, and they need to be shown to be effective to mitigate the activities that are on the property. Otherwise, they're useless. So, that's where we stand with with the drainage plan and with regards to the site improvements generally. The lighting plan, there still has not provided this board with any plan that quantifies the intensity of the lighting used on the subject property or measures the light spillover onto the neighboring properties and adjoining streets. And I think that, Phil, did you bring that?
I didn't, but one thing I would.
If you have to,
Phil Johanning, 23 Parker Drive. One thing that it says in the lighting plan is that they will put some kind of shield on. They have photographs of every kind of light, but they don't show how the shield would work or where they would buy it or anything. And I guess I would say this lighting is not permitted today, not permitted today. So if they're going to tilt the lights down or they're going to put a shield around them, why don't they do it today when this lighting is not permitted? And so I guess I don't understand the lighting plan, and I don't understand why they don't execute it so that we can see how well it works. And with respect to lights being turned off, the lights along their driveway don't ever seem to be turned off. So, like when, and on the side of Hannah's house, there's a new light that shines right in my bedroom window. And I don't know that that was shown on the lighting plan. Now, maybe they'll say she's not part of the nursery, but she is occupying a house that's on the nursery lot. And so if there's a light on the side of her house that's shining into my bedroom window, I think it needs to be regulated like any other lighting on the property.
one thing, currently, there is no lighting restriction.
No, it's in the original special permits.
Oh.
In the 1987, in the 1967,
What
there's
is-
lighting restrictions in all of those.
What does it say?
Well, that you can't have this, that you can't, I don't
have
remember
light?
verbatim, but
Okay,
let's dig them out.
Okay. I'll take a look.
So the,
I mean, obviously, what the Board of Appeals provided is still in force for the nursery. And we're not going to, at least I don't think we're going to make an exception for the landscaping business to what the Board of Appeals required for the nursery.
It's hard to get Mr. Prondak to come up at 10 o'clock at night, you know. So enforcement is challenging.
Okay.
so just, going through the memo that I submitted, the next issue is regard to traffic in the area. And as Chairman Whiteside had pointed out in at one of the previous meetings, that there are these requirements under the bylaw, but then there's also the general requirements of 48 Section 9, and one of those requirements is that just like any other special permit, a special permit can only be granted if the zoning relief can be done without substantial detriment to the public good. In this case, Thayer Nursery is seeking this board's permission to make and receive truck deliveries using the narrow roadways of the Scotts Woods neighborhood. As this implicates the health, safety, and welfare of Milton residents sharing those same narrow roadways, this board should require Thayer Nursery to submit a professional traffic study with its application, which explains the impact the proposed truck deliveries will have on abutters and nearby residents, and sets forth a proposal to mitigate any adverse effects. Now, I know that Mr. Corcoran had talked about the number of deliveries being made to Thayer Nursery. That's only half of the equation with regards to the traffic impact that's going to be felt in the area. You know, as I think that it was discussed previously, just with regards to the kiln-dried firewood, those arrive by 18-wheel trucks and delivered, I think, 17 cords at a time. And then it's used, the property is used as a storage facility where dump trucks are loaded up, and then those dump trucks are going to deliver those 17 cords to various locations. So obviously, there's going to be, for every one delivery of an 18-wheel truck, you know, there's going to be a multiple of that deliveries coming off-site. And those are in large pickup trucks. You know, just because this might have been happening in the past doesn't mean that it doesn't warrant a study here as to what is the impact here. What is the best way to do this? If this is going to happen, how are they going to do this that's going to be the least impactful to the surrounding neighborhood? Because what was happening before was not to the satisfaction of the abutters. And I think that one of the primary purposes of this bylaw amendment was to allow Thayer Nursery to reintroduce certain uses, but to do so in a way that doesn't adversely affect or minimizes the adverse effect of those activities on abutters. So we need to understand what the traffic flow is in order to understand how to improve it. And so that's where we're coming from with regards to a traffic study being done and the results of that being implemented in Thayer Nursery's activities on the site.
So on the traffic study, just so we don't lose it, it does seem to me that once we determine the amount of traffic that we're going to allow, if there were to be a traffic study, that would have to be known. So I just point that out to you. It may be that there is information needed if the traffic, unless it was but of course they can't measure the traffic as it currently exists because the landscaping business doesn't operate now. So you can see that what a traffic study right now might be a little, might be hard to get all the necessary information for. But I mean, I think that we need to determine when we get to the traffic section whether or not we feel that a traffic study is necessary.
I mean, I know that there's ways to flush out what the anticipated number of vehicles on, you know, that the activities would generate. I mean, that can be done, I know.
Let me just, okay, continue.
All right, so, and I'm almost done.
Just on the traffic, before we go on, page 9, to the extent that we can continue to just move this dialogue, you have total deliveries to nursery, as Mr. Dunn points out, those are the 18-wheelers, but I would assume that there can be some, perhaps, I shouldn't assume, but perhaps there's some ITE standard or something that would allow some determination of what that impact would then be on deliveries. You may know better than I do.
There is, yeah. They'll name a landscaping business, they'll name a nursery business, schools, churches, restaurants, anything.
Right.
They'll take square footage and they'll say that should generate X amount of vehicles. And then the engineer can determine that so many, 40% will probably exit and go south on Forest, and 60% will go north on Forest. And after that, 60% goes north on Forest, so much will go east on Hillside, so much will go west on Hillside.
The bylaw itself doesn't have a traffic section in it. It has an operations section. So when we get to the operations section, we can discuss this. But there is no specific traffic plan requirement.
So just in closing, because I'm sure that you folks are sort of tired of hearing my voice, but, if I could just sort of direct you back to the, both my memo from March 23rd, and then also, I don't know which version, if I'd asked the board to adopt my January
We have
8th, 2015 memo.
introduced
into-
that.
Yeah, okay. And just take a look at that, because,
The January 8th memo.
January 8th, 2015, or 7th, or I don't know which one.
Eight.
The bylaw amendment itself indicates that the planning board may only grant a special permit for landscaping business where it finds compliance with the purpose of the zoning amendment and with all of the foregoing terms, conditions, standards, and requirements. You guys have a lot on your plate, and what you do impacts this neighborhood for the foreseeable future. And as Mr. Prondak indicated, there need to be, and I'm sure that you will, give this a thorough analysis, hold there to the requirements of the bylaw, and that's what we'd ask.
But one thing you say for the foreseeable future, what actually the bylaw provides is that if we issue a permit, it be time limited between 1 and 3 years, I think, for the initial permit. And the reason is, of course, that the bylaw contemplates that when we get back together in a year, 2 years, 3 years, however long it is, that the evidence as to how the permit has worked during the term of the permit will be a major factor in determining whether or not it's reauthorized. I mean, that is, in many ways, that is the ultimate enforcement mechanism. I mean, if the building inspector doesn't get out there to inspect, it doesn't mean that at the end of the permit, that if it is shown there has been, it isn't working, that it isn't working with these best efforts, whatever the best efforts may be, determined by the board, then presumably there will either have to be better efforts specified, or the permit would be not reauthorized.
Well, I think that's why setting specifics or including specific requirements and standards in whatever decision that you wind up coming up with is very important, because that's going to be the base for which, when we come back in here in a year or 2 years or 3 years, we're going to be working off of. So, like I said, you guys have a lot of work in front of you. I appreciate the fact that you've listened to me. I know that it gets contentious at times. I know that you guys put in your best efforts here. And Mr. Joanning and Mr. Rowe appreciate that. So that's all.
Okay. Yes, sir. Do you have a question, Emily?
Yes, I do. Just to note that
Mr.
the
Dunn?
building commissioner, no, not from Mr. Dunn, but it was something that he said that made me think of it. The building commissioner, Joe Prondak, had written a memo on February 26, 2015,
Yeah.
and we might want to make sure that that's reintroduced into this new
Would you
hearing
give
as well.
that to Tim and ask that he,
It's got my comments on it, though, but I think you probably have a clean copy in your files. You've got it?
Yeah, I'll make sure a clean copy is.
okay,
Thank
so
you.
the building commissioner's memo will be made part of the record. Yes, sir, Mr. Rowe.
John Rowe, 23 Parkwood Drive. I'd like to play a video if I could. Bill, can you help me with the projector? We've had a lot of talk about firewood, and so I thought I would just show you. Mr. Cochran has talked about how quiet the loading or unloading of firewood is, and I just thought I would show you. They took a video off Thayer Nursery's Facebook page that shows the unloading of firewood. So the sound is just on my machine. I don't know if you can, it's shouldn't be that loud, but. I don't think this started at the beginning, so I'll play it again. It's just 10 seconds. So this is actually was taken from Thayer's Facebook page. So this is an actual tractor trailer truck unloading the firewood. This wood warehouse is about 100 feet from my property line, probably 200 feet from my home. And I can hear this in my home with the windows closed. And also the vibration in the house. You can imagine that there's vibration with these tractor trailer trucks coming in. And one of, and Mr. Dunn brought this up. Mr. Dunn brought this up that, we have the number of deliveries coming into Thayer Nursery. This is 17 cords of wood being delivered by their application at least twice a week during the season. And they have 5 dump trucks that deliver the wood, and most of the wood is delivered on Saturday and Sunday. So what happens is the dump trucks are loaded, the front-end loaders, which I can hear from my home, dumped into the dump trucks, and then we have deliveries all weekend long going in and out of there, which, the diesel exhaust is at times overwhelming. It permeates the neighborhood, especially in the winter. Sometimes the air is heavy. When it's humid, the air is very heavy. And diesel dump trucks, I believe, have to be started in the cold weather and idled. And I believe, and I think you probably come to the same conclusion that I have come to, that this is not a landscaping operation. This is a very high-impact industrial operation that I don't believe belongs in a residential neighborhood. This bylaw was written to protect the neighbors and to hopefully preserve the residential character of the neighborhood. And I don't believe an industrial operation like this, that it's a wood distribution business that distributes 1,000 cords of wood in a 6-month period. That's very, very high impact. It may help if you went over to Eagle Farm. Eagle Farm sells cash and carry firewood at their store on Randolph Avenue. It's very neatly stacked, and it probably is maybe a half a cord of wood that they store there for cash and carry. I have no issue with the current firewood sales at Thayer Nursery. The special permit that they have from the ZBA allows them to sell cash and carry, and it's quite specific in the ZBA ruling what they can do, and it clearly says no machinery can load the wood, and wood can be loaded by hand into trunks of cars, SUVs, things of that nature. And I think that that is an appropriate use for Thayer Nursery to allow people to come up and cash and carry. We have no issue with that. But this is very, very high impact. One more thing I'd like to bring up. I spoke at this meeting a few weeks ago concerning compliance. Attorney Cochran was here a year ago in front of this board and had talked about how Thayer Nursery is under cease and desist. They're not allowed to do these things. And that they've been a bad neighbor. They have not been a good neighbor, but they've mended their ways. He went in front of, and the planning board here recommended approval for the zoning change to allow them to reintroduce the landscaping, the wood sales. Mr. Cochran went in front of the warrant committee and said the same thing. Thayer Nursery over the years had not listened to neighbors' concerns. The neighbor concerns didn't start when Phil and I moved into the neighborhood. They've been going on for decades. And you can see the records at the ZBA. But he said they've mended their ways. Then he went in front of town meeting and said the same thing. In town meeting said, well, let's give them a second chance. And they voted to make this zoning amendment. They voted for the amendment. Let's give them a second chance. If you were Thayer Nursery, if I were Thayer Nursery, I'd have said, you know what? They're giving me a second chance. I'm going to comply with the cease and desist order that the ZBA gave me, and I'm going to cease and desist my landscaping operations. But they didn't. They kept it up. They continued to run their operation. Mr. Prondak wrote them letters, told them to cease and desist, and they didn't. And finally, the town of Milton went to Norfolk Superior Court and got a court order. Judge Wilson signed a court order demanding that Thayer Nursery cease and desist their landscape operations. Does this sound like an outfit that was going to say, thank you, Town of Milton, thank you, town meeting members, thank you, planning board, thank you, warrant committee. We know you gave us a second chance, and we're really going to abide by the town laws and regulations. They didn't do that. You can go up to the property today and they have their excavator parked there, their lawn care van parked there, all of their landscaping equipment is on the property, it's all stored there. As we speak today, there have been no changes. I don't believe that this is an organization that will ever adhere to any regulation this board or the town of Milton ever puts on them. Their past behavior has proven that they will not, that they will do as they please. I mean, this is factual. You know, I submitted a copy of Judge Wilson's cease and desist order the last hearing. I've got another copy. I can give it to you. I don't know if this is a new hearing, a new application. You know, we've gone through that.
It's a new hearing, and why don't you do that? Give it to Tim, and he
Okay.
will.
Also, and I forgot to mention the artisans market. You know, there are just so many things that Thayer seems to snub their nose at the town and the people who gave them a second chance. And I guess I'm just very concerned about, people talk about enforcement. Well, which came first, the chicken or the egg? We have non-compliance. And that's the issue, non-compliance. And Emily, at one of the hearings you asked that you wanted to hear from Thayer to see how they were going to address the non-compliance issue. We haven't seen any of that. And I don't believe that this organization can self-regulate, if you will. There is no way that this organization has proven that it could ever self-regulate. And you know, don't take my word for it. We have the facts. This has gone to court. We have the ZBA rulings, and we have all of the neighbors that this has been going on for decades.
The idea, of course, is that if we require them to do a fair amount of work so that they can conduct their landscaping business. And the question of when we would require the work to be done is something we will discuss. But if they do the work and then disregard the plans, they run the risk of having a very short-lived business.
How is that? Because I'm going to be here in front of you? You know, this is a very, very, there has to be something put in place to regulate. You know, am I the regulator? You know, I see the violation, I go to the building commissioner, and the building commissioner says, well, I didn't see that, and then I get my evidence, and then I go in front of this board and present the evidence. And then we go to Superior Court. You know, there has to be a way to regulate this, and what we've seen is that self-regulation doesn't work. You know, right now, they're not in compliance. And we have another ZBA hearing coming up concerning the state of affairs right now. You know, I appreciate this board and the work you do.
What is the ZBA hearing that's coming up?
Phil, has that been scheduled yet?
Yeah, that's April 30th.
It should be in the Milton Times.
And that,
But you tell me it's in the Milton Times.
Was that an enforcement order that you appealed from the building commissioner? or-
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And there's also another case in Superior Court. So my point is, the neighbors aren't looking for trouble. And this zoning ordinance was presented to the town meeting, and they voted on it, saying that this was here to protect the neighbors and the residential character of the neighborhood. And I don't see how allowing that wood, I don't see how allowing a large-scale, we need to look at what goes on. We talk about the deliveries of these materials, you know, mulch and crushed stone and gravel and bricks and cement. It's delivered there, and then it's promptly loaded onto flatbeds, dump trucks, diesel dump trucks, and this is a staging area for this type of business. Believe me, we have no issue with the nursery. It's the landscaping activities, and sometimes I wonder if people actually, this is not somebody putting a lawnmower on a truck and leaving every morning. At 7 a.m., they start their landscaping activities, which is really the staging of material. All the materials that were delivered there are loaded onto dump trucks, flatbed trailers, etc., via the front-end loaders, which are very noisy, diesel. You know, the pollution alone is indicative to a residential neighborhood, especially in the Scotts Woods hillside neighborhood. I mean, the most bucolic neighborhood in the town. And I think that I'm just hoping that you can consider these things. And it's not going to be easy, but, you know, a lot of these activities could really be the staging area for all this stuff. There's no reason why it couldn't be in an industrial site where it belongs. And I just want you to really think about what the zoning ordinance was for, what the town meeting members voted on, and the town meeting you were all there, the town meeting members voted on this zoning change because it was presented to them that it would protect the neighborhood and protect the neighbors. So I just want you to think about that. Think about, you just saw the wood being, you know, delivered. This isn't mamby-pamby stuff. This is high-impact industrial. So, thank you.
Who else would like to be heard on this application? Okay, well, we're not closing the hearing, and we will receive further further input. But I told you what I thought. I guess we should just, as a preliminary matter, recognize that the zoning requires these various plans. In number 4, an application for a special permit shall include the following plans. The plan shall be prepared in a form suitable for recording, and each plan, rule, or specification shall be specifically approved and shall be enforceable as part of the special permit. And as I say, we've got plans listed A through S. And the application runs along generally the same lines. So my suggestion is that we look at some of these plans and see whether or not we think that they are adequate, and whether or not if they were adopted as written, they would provide for effective and convenient enforcement. So, the first plan is the existing conditions plan, and I think that we've seen the existing conditions plan. What do we think about it? Do we have the existing condition plan of both sites in this?
I don't believe we
I think
Yeah,
it's just
here-
I'm sorry,
under-
we do,
yeah.
yes.
Here it is. It's probably should be entitled existing conditions.
We should probably confirm that it's the existing conditions.
On the second site, you mean?
Is this the, is plan of Thayer Nursery for nursery layout existing conditions or proposed conditions?
For the 217 to 237 Hillside Street.
It's really essentially both. It is essentially the existing condition. It's not proposed to be changed. Well, it is existing, although there is a proposed for further infill of some buffering trees.
So those
Those have
trees
not
and
been
greens
installed.
are proposed.
Those
Okay.
have not been installed.
Thank you.
Okay, this is in a double A area, and so you can see there is a house on this, and it would, if it were not used under, does the special permit, the 87 special permit pick this one up?
No, because it was purchased after that. The ZBA ruled in, I believe, '09 that it is exempt because it has over 2 acres.
So this is, okay, so this is not covered by the 87 permit. Okay, so those are the two existing conditions plans. They probably are adequate. Existing site typography, building structures, utility services. Are the utility services in there?
They are.
They are? Okay. Everything,
It looked like it was checked to me.
okay.
Yeah.
The deeds, copies of the deeds we've got. I actually haven't read them, but we do have them. And we should read them over just to see whether or not they raise
And I'll
any.
just change the leases to include Josh and my name.
What?
The leases should be updated, because currently it's leased to Thayer Nursery. So I'll change that so it says it's leased to Maggie and Josh.
Well, that would be just a new,
That's
a
a new-
lease amendment.
Yeah. Do we really have to do that if we each own it?
What?
If we already own them,
Well, no, I understand that you, but, you know, given the fact that if a special permit were to be issued, it would probably be litigated. We want to make sure that i's are dotted and t's are crossed. And I mean, the town, if it gets litigated, we want it to be as good a special permit as possible, so that the court will say, this looks like a good special permit, dismiss. Not permit, but the case. But Mr. Dunn, do you have a question?
I just, and I'm sorry if you said this, is the meeting, is it closed?
No.
So
This is, you know, if you come up, if you have a comment on these particular things, you should come up and make them. Just raise your hand and say, I've got a comment.
I'm sorry to interrupt the sort of the deliberative process here, but
What we're doing is we're looking at these things and seeing if we think that we're not voting on whether or not these are adequate. We're discussing whether or not they seem to be adequate.
my concern is that it's just that there's going to be supplemental information that's going to be provided.
Then obviously,
we have an opportunity.
then obviously it
All right,
should be,
that's the only thing I
it
think.
should be considered.
Hearing is over.
It needs to be, you need to be able to comment on it. And in fact, what's here, I mean, when you know how we're going about doing this, which is looking at the zoning and looking at the response, if people have input or comments, they should raise their hands and we'll hear them.
Is one of our staff members, Tim or Emily, are you guys keeping a list of items where we come through and say, okay, we still need this? So for example, the lease amendment, so that everybody has a clear understanding at the end? Awesome.
I think that's, so we'll, okay.
Let's see.
The wetlands delineation plan, we're told that there are no wetlands on any of these sites. And that that is
Page 6. Yeah.
page 4?
Page 6.
3?
Page 6.
It's on page 6?
Yep.
Shouldn't be on page 6. Should be on page,
Of their application, it's page 6.
okay. Yeah,
Or
they
C.
they say that, that's what they say. Okay, here, I'm sorry, I was, it's right where it should be. The drainage plan, we are, as soon as this rain ends, you're going to get out there and take a look.
Yes. Just a quick comment on that. We do know that some changes were made, particularly with the drainage swale. The leach pits have not been installed, that they need to be done. We need to look at and evaluate the change that occurred with the creation of the ditch along the property and how to address drainage issues there. We're looking at the notion of piping from that to this detention area over here, creating additional berm, but we will modify the drainage plan once the snows have gone and the engineers can get back out there hopefully in the next week or two. And so hopefully by the 9th, we'll have a revised plan to share with abutters and to share with the board.
Can I just suggest, given that this may be the start of a lot of spring rains, that if there's something that can be done immediately to clear out any sort of damming or blockage, that be done. So, I'm not saying that everything has to be installed immediately, but there should be some sort of remediation for the partial
I think that's a good idea.
installation.
Get out
Yeah.
and do something over here to protect anything from flowing off the
Right.
site, and probably think about getting ready to install the leach pit so that there's somewhere for this water to drain to, and to drain into the ground.
All right, the landscape plan is a somewhat difficult one because I thought we did just did the drainage plan.
Sorry, I thought we were still doing the wetlands. Never mind. Drainage, yes.
The landscape plan has to have and this is actually, this Sam Lepore's comments come into focus under the landscape plan. And the question as I see it is, have they done a good job of providing for a efficient, convenient operations area which will impact the neighbors as little as possible.
Was it the parking plan or the landscaping plan, or both? I guess it's both.
I think it ends up being both.
There's overlap.
Yeah, okay.
There's overlap. Which was the other plan you were talking about?
The parking.
The parking
And
plan.
operations, for that matter.
And operations, exactly.
Okay.
Really all
together.
I think part of her concern is her side, her shared lot line being treated with the same care as the back lot line.
Right. Well, the current operations area is basically next to Messrs. Joe Henning and Rowe.
Right.
And this would bring it and put it in front of the old barn, but basically on the Lepore lot line. And they are suggesting that a 8-foot fence, I believe it's an 8-foot fence, with sound attenuating material next. And Mike, we're going to at some point try and determine whether the sound attenuating material is the best possible, what they're proposing, if we can. But if a fence can be erected with sound attenuating material, would it be reasonably likely that we haven't simply shifted a nuisance from up near the Parkwood Drive area down to next to the Lepore residence? And I think she suggested that she saw no reason why the fence she got should be any less than the fence that was being provided on the other
Right.
lot line, and I think that certainly that makes some sense. I don't know that there's any explanation as to why there is a difference.
Her 8-foot fence, that's the wrong terminology, I'm sorry. The 8-foot fence that's going to be along her lot line will be on top of a 1-foot berm. So that'll be a total height of 9 feet. But that's still lower than the total height of fence and berm along the back, as I understand. I'm looking for the numbers now.
Yeah, the problem with the fence along
Yeah.
the back, it sits lower,
Right.
so that's why the fence needed to be taller.
So there's a
Because they-
berm along the back as well? Is the fence on top of that's what I wasn't quite sure. The fence is on top of a berm?
So the
Okay.
property goes at a slope,
Okay.
and so they're on that's the lowest side.
Mm-hmm.
So for them to have an efficient block, 10-foot fence would be better than an 8-foot fence. I don't think an 8-foot fence would give them the protection they need.
So is there any reason not to have a 10-foot fence along the other property line?
Our main concern is the wind factor. As you know, according to Forbes magazine, Milton is the windiest city in the country. We have an average wind of 14 miles per hour. The gusts can get up to 60 miles per hour, according to the Blue Hills Observatory. Our fear is if you do a 10-foot fence and then you attach the sound mat to it, you're essentially creating a sail, which jeopardizes the integrity of the fence. So if you think a 10-foot fence is a better option, then we propose maybe not do the sound barrier. I think that a 10-foot fence with sound barrier is going to be an extremely challenging maintenance issue for us. Even after this winter, if you drive around Milton, you can see all the fences that are on the ground.
Then the second question would be, how would a 2-foot berm with the 8-foot fence affect the drainage along that area? If you brought that 1-foot berm up to a 2-foot berm and then put the 8-foot fence along it, does it make an effective difference to the drainage? Does it still attract the wind? I mean, if you can't increase the height of the fence, can you increase the height of the berm, basically?
The problem is, and again, I'm not an engineer, but as I understand it, when you increase the berm, then the fence posts are actually in an elevated berm, so the stability of the posts are jeopardized. So if you wanted to do a 10-foot fence, you would want your posts being in solid ground.
No, it would be an 8-foot
So
fence,
an 8-foot fence on a, that I'd have to check with the fence installers. I don't know.
Could you get a letter from the fence installers on these points? That would be
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. We did have a letter.
We've got 3 people who want to be heard on this, so we'll hear you all. We're not going to, the fence is as important an issue as anything, because it is, as I understand it, supposed to do the major job of sound mitigation.
So people hire us to do noise reduction in their landscape, and from there are 4 kind of aspects that go into noise reduction, and it's a systems approach, not just a one single product approach. And so having a fence will actually deflect and reflect sound. So having a fence there will actually bring the noise back to us. So that's one aspect. You also want to have vegetation there to absorb any noise. And so part of our plan is planting on both sides of the fence, planting on our side of the fence. So it actually, the arborvitae's planted on our side will absorb some of the sound before it gets to the fence, where it might reflect it back at us. And then on her side of the fence, wherever she wants it, in between her, wherever Pam would like it, we would cite some Norway spruces. So it doesn't necessarily have to be along the property line. If she wants it closer to her house, that's okay with us too.
So then I think your landscape plan is only showing one row of the plants.
I think, though, in the narrative, it actually describes the second row.
Right, but the
So
plan
the
becomes
plan-
part of the special permit if granted, so we need to.
All right,
add that.
make a note of that. Now, let's get,
Before they come up, I just have 2 more questions on the
Okay.
fence issue. One is, why does the fence stop? I've never understood that. And I don't know if that may be fine with the abutter, so it's just a question. And the second is, I brought it up last night, I still don't entirely see the purpose of this driveway behind the wood barn. And if the driveway can be done away with and worked around, I think there was a request from the abutter of moving the fence over towards the wood barn and wondering if, and away from her setback. It seems to me like the driveway is the only thing really preventing that, so I'd be interested in hearing a comment on that.
We actually did consider that today, and we considered it sort of, we don't have anything on plan, but concept would be that we would bring additional plantings on this side of the fence, running parallel or a line down off of the corner of the barn, leaving sort of an opening between this edge of the bin so that there's some ability to get back there, but they don't need to do much, if anything, back there. We just need to leave access to the area in the rear, but it would be sort of planted and then masked so there would be no obvious reason to go by, and there's no reason for trucks to come through here at all. When the diesel is delivered to the site, the truck actually backs in, the hose runs in this way, and their own trucks can back in, be filled, and everything comes back out. So this area can be modified, it can be retreated. The question is, the details of that, but certainly bringing forward to approximately almost to 40 feet. I mean, it's this edge of line here, this corner is slightly closer to the property line than this corner. That's at 37 feet, so somewhere between 37 and 40 is where the additional sort of planted buffer
Okay.
would be.
I think that's a nice addition. And then just why does the fence stop? And again, I've
Why does the fence stop here?
Right.
Really because it's taking beyond here, and it's just buffering any noise that's going, and visual of anything that's going from this operation in that direction. Really intended to mask everything along that line.
And really, one of the, it really comes down to aesthetics as well. Our neighborhood doesn't have a lot of fences, and we're trying to delineate where the activities of the landscaping activities shall occur, so we're kind of concentrating in that area and we're not anticipating a lot of landscaping activities occurring past that fence. And as,
Actually, I have one comment, Josh Oldfield, 24 Forest Street.
why don't you come up to the table and speak into the microphone?
Josh Oldfield, 24 Forest Street, and just to address Brian's concern there, from the end point of the fence there, it transitions into a 10,000 square foot grow out area of 6 to 12 foot, 14 foot spruce trees in a layered fashion. So that really, there's, it aesthetically as well as functionality would be served by the planting of that grow-out area.
And the fence stops in line with the building, so everything is sort of lines up to something, so there's not irregular stop and start points on the
Yeah, just
property.
from a design perspective, it's always nice to make correlations between architecture and rigid points on your property. And it just made sense from an architectural standpoint to make that the endpoint and then transition into the evergreens. And we can make it a point to stagger the evergreens with the larger ones towards the property line and step it down. That's not a problem whatsoever.
Do we have a elevation or a picture of the fence itself and how it's going to look from?
It is in your book. That's a 8-foot fence that was erected at the site walk, and that was not sitting on a 1-foot berm.
Most of the way back.
Almost at the back?
Yeah.
And it was designed because we have an existing fence on the other property.
Oh, that one, okay, yeah, yeah.
So if you want to get a feel for a height of a fence, there's a 8-foot marker in the corner there. That gives you, that's an indicator of an 8. It starts, a 6-foot fence is the bottom stripe, 8 foot and 10 foot's at the top. So 8 foot is the height of the ceiling here, 10 feet cannot fit in a room.
Are you going to use pressure-treated wood on this?
Yes.
And how deep are those posts?
Minimum 3 feet in concrete.
In concrete?
Yes, every post.
And they're pressure-treated what?
Pressure treated, all the. 6 by 6.
6, yeah.
Oh, the posts themselves are 6 by 6, yeah.
The boards are 1 by 6, and that cross member is what?
It's an 8-foot section. So each panel is 8 feet.
Yeah, 2 by,
Are those 2 by 4s?
no, I think they were 2 by 6s to tell you the truth.
Well, we'd like to know a little bit
We-
about
Well,
the
that
fence.
is in
We have the construction details in the package.
In this package.
Yes.
It doesn't go all.
2 by 4s is the cross member.
I just want to make sure it goes past the material.
The end.
Oh, that's fine. Okay.
No, we don't have that. It's an 8-foot pressure treated with 6 by 6 posts placed 8 feet apart.
Okay, well, whereabouts is it?
Yeah.
It's on page 7 of the narrative.
I think maybe it's a setback.
And my concern really is of a 12-foot fence is, as I drove around Milton and I observed fences, we don't have any 12-foot fences in any residential or even commercial sites. So I was down at the fruit center, and their fence is only 8 feet tall, and they only have a 6-foot setback. So the fruit center, in my opinion, is located in a it is located in a residential area, and it's probably the busiest and most congested store that we have, and they only have an 8-foot fence with a 6-foot setback. And I honestly just don't think a 12-foot fence is really a precedent that you want to be setting. I just don't think Milton is a 12-foot
Well, we were
fence community.
talking 10 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even 10. 10 is
I
excessive.
understand, but
10
you've
is
got 10
excessive.
feet in one place and 8 feet in the other, but we've got, we'll see what the neighbor has to say about this. They've waited patiently to offer some comments. Is it time? We can we can make these requirements for the fence a little more specific. The cross member is a matter of some concern to me.
Your letter that got sent to you this morning, I think it actually was yesterday. It says, this is from Reliable Fence and Supply, and it goes, Mr. Oldfield, the proposed perimeter fence is to be constructed of pressure-treated pine with 6x6 posts set in 48 by 18-inch concrete footings, with two 2x6 horizontal boards and 1 1/4 by 6-inch vertical planking. The perimeter fence is to be installed in a 1-foot earthen berm. Due to the excessive winds in Milton, this fence will hold up extremely well and should deflect sound from the neighbors. If the perimeter fence was to be elevated to 12 feet, this could possibly cause failure due to extreme winds and would also be an eyesore for the neighbors. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, James Beto, Project Manager.
Well, what's shown has actually 3 cross members. But otherwise, why don't you print that out and give it to Tim, and we'll make that, he'll distribute it. But he's talking about a 10-foot fence there?
Yes.
Okay.
Talking about 8.
8.
No.
No?
Wait a minute. I was moving it over to you. Proposed fence, just says perimeter fence.
All right. Well, we're going to hear from other people. We're not going to decide anything about the fence without hearing from the people who might be impacted by the fence, or actually might be mitigated by the fence. So,
Can we do that now?
what?
Or we can do that now? or
We're
we
going
gonna
to do that right now. Yes.
Good evening, Pamela Pori, 44 Forest Street. I just have a question on the whole land care yard location. Is there any way to move that away from me, like they did on the easterly side of the property?
Well,
Why-
it has
why-
been moved, it's been moved a little bit by what he's suggesting there, by the elimination of that roadway.
But I have the bulk of the entire commercial activity next to my property. They're proposing an 8-foot fence. 18-wheel trucks are 12.5 feet high. They're going to be backing into those bins, the storage bins, gravel, cobblestones, mulch. They're going to be backing in there. And what good is an 8-foot fence going to do for the visual effect of that? And just common sense to me as far as the wind impact, if you plant trees on both sides of a fence, yeah, if you have a fence in the middle of a field with nothing protecting it, it's going to blow over. So planting trees on both sides, to me, would mitigate the force of the wind. I mean, I think that's common sense. But I just don't think it's fair for them to move that from the back of the property next to me, when next to the barn, there's plenty of space to move this activity. I just don't understand how we're even talking about this.
Next to the barn and back of the garden shop.
The main barn on the,
Next to which barn?
the main barn.
The wood barn?
The showcase barn, no, the showcase barn right
Okay, the
here.
showcase barn back of the house.
Yes.
And where would you put it?
This could all be moved right here, away from any abutter.
Into the area that they have
Just plantings.
the planting. Well, we would want to hear from the the neighbors about that.
I mean, because if you look at the plantings in the back of the property, all this buffer, I don't know how deep this is. Do we have any idea how deep?
To where?
This whole area here, this is all plantings.
112
This-
feet.
this depth.
112-ish.
112 to the back of the lab house, so it's
So it's about
probably
100 feet.
Okay.
So I'm getting a whole 15 feet of trees. I don't understand how that.
Well, I think we tried to increase it to 40 tonight. I'm not saying it's 100, but we
Well,
did try to get it to
again, the fence is
40.
back 30 feet.
Mhm.
I've got the fence right on the property line.
Well, fence is 15 feet, but it's not 30 feet.
But
on the property.
it should be, I should have as much buffer here as they have here, in all fairness. And getting back to the fruit center, I don't believe they allow 18-wheel trucks into the fruit center. I think they have to transport smaller shipments. They don't allow 18-wheel trucks. So I have all the 18-wheel, not just the firewood, but all of the mulch delivery, the stone delivery, and the reloading and loading and back and forth. It's all along my property. That's just not fair.
Well, the neighbors on Hillside Street and Forest Street would be closer, their houses would be closer to where you're proposing to put the yard than where your house is.
But the land next to me is a separate lot than my house, and I've explained
Well,
before.
We're just talking
that-
fairness.
Well, I had plans of building a house right there next to this fence, because that's the only place it perks. I've been paying taxes on that for 32 years as a buildable lot. My kids are grown, that was my plan, that was my dream, and my house would be right next to this whole activity.
So what do people think? I mean, it seems to me that it seems to me that there could be a different plan, but the bottom line here is that if you go back to the drawing boards, you're basically denying this permit.
But why do we have to accept the plan just because they proposed it that way? I mean, it doesn't make any sense
Well,
to me at all.
usually a interest is sort of like if someone had brought in a different plan prepared by an engineer hired by that person and said, here is a plan and this makes a lot more sense, it certainly is better than not doing that and saying, planning board, you should tell them to design something different. Usually some self-help is useful in something like this. If you're looking at this, I mean, the site plan has been there. If there is a good alternative, a concept sketch showing just the good alternative would be hugely useful, rather than a general appeal to fairness, which is, you make a point. What is fair? I mean, there's no such thing as perfect fairness.
But I'm depending on you, the board, to protect me as a neighbor, as a resident, and this does not protect me at all.
But that's what you say, and I personally think the fence would protect you in certain respects, and to say it would not protect you at all, that's not how I view it. I think that they are attempting, with this plan, to offer you protections.
Why did they move it from the rear, from the easterly side of the property then? Why did they feel they had to relocate it? Because it was a nuisance, the noise, the odor, everything. And I'm here in support of, obviously, John and Phil, but
But you're saying,
then why did they move it away from them? Because they knew it was a nuisance, they knew it was not fair to them, and now this isn't fair to me. They're not being good neighbors to me.
And there's no.
So what does the board think of this?
The fence in the back that's 10 feet high, in fact, is
It's on a
at about
2-foot berm.
184. It looks like Mr. Rowe and Mr. Joe Henning's house is about at 178. 184 plus 10 feet is 194. If you subtract that from 178, it's about 16 feet the top of the fence. If you were standing above at the back of your house, the top of the fence would be about 16 feet over your head. The fence on the Lepori side that's 8 feet high on a 1-foot berm, if it is 9 feet, but yet her land is higher. But personally, I agree with the fact that you don't see 10-foot fences. You don't see 10-foot fences anywhere. A 10-foot fence is extreme. They used to call anything above a 6-foot fence a grudge fence. 10 feet is extreme. I wouldn't want a 10-foot fence in my yard. It's like living next to the Berlin Wall.
So what's the answer?
Well, I think one of the things
8-foot
is
fence
that
is sufficient. I mean, I wouldn't want a 10-foot fence there.
What about the 18-wheel trucks
I mean,
that are,
well,
that are
because
frequenting? Then
if-
it's not
unless you're
just-
unless you're 8 feet tall, if your eyeball is standing at 6 feet and you're looking over an 8-foot fence, if the truck is right there, you're not going to see it.
A 12-and-a-half-foot
Just it's
truck?
geometry. I mean, you'd have to probably.
12-and-a-half-foot truck that's 50 feet away, you're not going to see it. Truck-
I'm not trying to convince you of something. You see what I'm saying? If you're standing behind an 8-foot fence, you don't see eyeball across the 8-foot fence. You see at an angle up to the 8.
Then why are they proposing an 8-foot for me and a 10-foot? I mean.
I don't know. I have no
And it's
idea.
really 12 feet high. So I just, again, it's just not fair. It's just, doesn't make sense to me.
I think you should also consider, and this may or may not impact you, but it's not just the fence that you're going to have there. You're going to have trees on both sides, and those trees will grow taller than 8 feet. It won't be necessarily.
Eventually.
If they
it's
plant
gonna
a
take years.
fast-growing species, and depending on how high the initial plantings are, but you should remember, it's not just the fence that's
Yeah,
going in that
and that's
park.
what I'm saying, as far as the wind impact, there will be trees. Again, I don't recall how many. Are they every 10 feet, every 15 feet? How wide, how far apart are the trees making that you're proposing? So,
Can
you
you
know.
plant the trees? You bring the trees in at 10 feet?
We're bringing them in, they're proposed
At 12 foot.
for the Norway spruces on Pam's property, 13 Norway spruces spec'd at 10 to 12 foot, sited where she would like. We understand that Norway spruces might be a little slower growing, so we've decided to bring in the arborvitaes, the deer-resistant arborvitaes, which are much faster growing, and they're spec'd at 10 to 12 feet on our side. So on our side, on both sides, the starting height will be 10 to 12 feet.
so how far apart is that? That's a,
Well, the 13 would be, on your side, would sort of be wherever you are, because currently, I never measured, but there's that natural buffer between your barn and our property fence, and our property line, which is probably, how many feet? I don't, 100 feet or so. There's an existing 100-foot buffer. And so wherever there are pockets in that buffer, wherever you like, we'll plant the spruces. And then the arborvitaes are planted.
Or even if there was a sight line that was natural vegetation now, that's deciduous, would be willing to come in and open up the pockets to create an environment that was suitable to accommodate 2, 3, whatever. Ultimately, it's your call where you want them. We'll create a cultural environment for these plants to succeed where you want them.
so basically, I guess my question tonight is, what are the chances of having them relocate this activity?
To what?
Relocate the land care yard?
Well,
mean, obviously,
I
that's
would
my
say
biggest
that
concern.
we need a plan as to where it would be relocated to.
Isn't that simply up to
That's for
the applicants to tell us if they want to move it or they don't want to move it? Why?
I think,
So,
if I may just comment, I mean, we did spend a fair amount of time a year ago, including significant presentation at town meeting, really based on this plan.
without my input.
And town meeting adopted this bylaw understanding that the plan as proposed would be like this with sufficient detail added to address the issue of mitigation of impact. So the plan was always to move to the area next to the barn because it is efficient, it is easy in, easy out, it's easiest for, in terms of operation of trucks to pull in and pull out, to offload, to deliver, everything's contained. It's easy to wall it off using the side of the barn and fencing and other plantings along the southerly side. That combination of things makes it easy and, in our opinion, easier to contain, easier to manage, easier to operate with the most benefit in terms of mitigation of impact. Placing another, it's like pushing the edge of the balloon when you start looking at other places. We did look at other, but it doesn't work as efficiently. A, we don't think it effectively buffers. B, as taking advantage of the existence of the wood barn as part of the setup of this area.
But you have the other barn. I mean, you have two barns, so there's one barn or the other barn that you could back it up to. So this is the part of the process I don't understand is, again, just being fair to all the butters.
I think that
I don't know what else to.
I think what we would say is if you bring in a plan showing an efficient layout, we would consider it.
At their discretion, though. I mean, it's, right,
What?
It's at the applicant's discretion, I assume, to do that.
Well, I mean, the applicant, if we specified that they had to put something somewhere else, but we would want a plan showing that it could be done, and that it could be done and be an efficient way to house a business.
Mm-hmm.
And
one of the other challenges here is you have a lot of site perimeter on Hillside Street and on Forest Street. This is a historic district. I'm assuming we're not going to want to see it from the street.
And the only way to be 100% fair would be put it right in the middle. That would be the only way to put it fair to
There's
everybody.
already
That's
structures
not
there.
logistically possible.
Yeah. Well,
So it's going to.
why isn't it logistically possible?
Because they'd have to knock down the whole thing and start all over.
No, they might have to move a parcel. So why should I and my family, for the rest of our lives, have to take the brunt of this? Because, I mean, this is going to be here for a while, I'm going to be here for a while. So what if they have to move the greenhouse?
If it doesn't work for you, bear in mind that when the special permit expires, you are able to come in and say, this just hasn't worked. Just hasn't worked. My life is terrible. I
And
can't.
can that be done annually, like I mentioned last night, instead of 3 years? That scares me.
It is possible the first review would be annual. I'm not sure, and it could be done annually. I'm not sure that the board would do it annually, but it might. But I mean, it isn't as though you're stuck with it forever if it doesn't work. I mean, there can be additional mitigating measures, and if, in fact, it can be shown that these measures don't give you adequate protection, then who knows? Maybe when the next permit comes around, there will be adjustments of how it will be used. I mean, if you come in with a plan and show a good alternative, we consider it, but they have, this is what they propose, and they are proposing mitigation measures to protect you, and you suggest that you don't think they are going to protect you, but maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're not. But if you are wrong, then at the end of the day, you wouldn't be as concerned as you are now about just not knowing whether or not it's going to work as intended.
Well, like I said, getting back to the buffer that they've given the easterly side of the property, I think I deserve the same buffer. The setback of 30 feet, trees on both sides on their property. I think.
And so what are you,
Exhausting.
what sort of a buffer are you proposing?
Well, the same as they're doing in the back.
What are, no, I mean, but what is this?
The fence is set 30 feet back, and there's plantings on both sides.
What does this show?
15 feet back.
15 feet.
The plantings are
And this
coming
is-
out
yeah,
40
this is an
feet away from the
Industrial
fence.
business, so 15 feet, is that a residential setback?
Well, the zoning
What
for
is
a fence is, shall be set back at least 15 feet. So we are
Is that residential or
adhering to
commercial?
the zoning of this.
That's in the current zoning.
In
the
this
zoning.
current zoning. So we are setting it at 15 feet. We chose the 30 feet for them really just from a logistical standpoint. We spec'd it out at the 15 feet, but having it at 15 feet would actually be behind the swale, and then we couldn't monitor what was going on behind the fence. So behind the fence to the stone wall of the Johanning Row property would be challenging for us to monitor. So that's why we chose to bump it in, and the next best place to bump it would be an additional 15. So that's why it sits at the 30-foot. That way we can monitor the swale and the drainage.
Okay, let's get a few more comments on this from Mr. Rowe and Mr. Dunn.
Thank you.
This is actually Matthew Dunn on behalf of Mr. Joining and Mr. Rowe. You know, there's been talk that there's leasehold interests for the entire, that Thayer controls the entire property or the entire site. So with those leasehold interests, you'd think that there's going to be some relocation of activities. For my own curiosity, I'll take this thing out. Is there any reason why the activities that are taking place, that are going to take place in, I don't know what corner you would say this is, here? Okay, couldn't be relocated in this corner here, the corner of Forest and Hillside? You move the nursery back over to where Pam's property is. It seems like a more natural access point to the road, an easier roadway. Or alternatively, where the nursery stock lawn section is here, it can be moved. Then there's a buffer area where it says this is along Hillside Street where it says lawn. You know, then it's away from all the residents here. And if you're going to put the onus of having to live next to a construction yard or a staging area, wouldn't the more appropriate party to bear the burden of the activities and the use be the applicant? It just seems that would probably be the fairest way to handle something like this. You
What
take
about
care of
Mr.
Pam.
What about the people across the street?
You're the applicant, though. So, I mean,
That's what I'm saying.
so what about the single-family residence here? 270 Hillside. I mean, you have two. You're talking about two lots that are the furthest away from abutters, right?
No.
That are the most grown-out areas of the entire place with the least intense uses. I mean, that just, as a matter of equity, it just seems
Well,
like.
interestingly enough,
So that's my.
If you want to speak, you have to address the chair because we're
so-
not going to get into a many-cornered discussion.
It was more, so Mike, it's more posed as a question as to, and maybe there's an answer to it, I don't know. But, you know, why is the question is this: why is the use of the intensive uses, the most intensive uses, being put next to Pam's yard when there's an area at the corner of Forest Street and Hillside Street, and then there's also another area that's probably makes the most sense, which is next to the 270 Hillside Street, which is away from all the residents except for and again, this whole area is controlled by Thayer, and leased by Thayer.
It is not actually. all controlled by Thayer. If you look at
I was looking at the leases that were included in the
number
application, so
267 Hillside Street, number 285 Hillside Street, number 292 Forest Street,
so
all of which would be impacted by your suggestion, and
well, let me go through the application. So 217 Hillside, 237 Hillside are leased to Thayer Corporation under a lease dated January 1st, 2009. Properties 270 Hillside.
and
Forest Street,
237 Hillside is right across the street from the Coles.
So 270 Hillside, which is right here.
Okay.
It's right here. I didn't submit this application. I mean, there's a lease.
I understand that.
Right? So there's a lease.
You are suggesting more fair ways to situate the workyard.
Okay, so I'll let them answer, but that's my question. I mean, here and here seem like they're not going to impact the abutters. The only people they're going to impact are the applicants, and the applicants want the zoning relief, so isn't it equitable that the applicants should bear the burden of the activity? That's all.
You don't see that Mr. Walter is like directly across from where he's sticking?
Then Mr. Walter should present his argument that Ms. Lepori just presented. I mean, she's asking for an equitable
Well,
solution.
no,
and I'm
you
presenting
just said it was
there.
more fair, and I don't kind of agree with your statement, I guess.
No, we've got Mr. Rowe, we've got Mr. Johanning. We're going to do these, but you should, back to the audience.
John Rowe, I wanted to talk about the fence.
No, use the microphone, please.
I want to talk about the fence along the, this I think is the easterly border of the property, and there's a 10-foot fence that's going to be in front of, or on my side of the hemlocks, in the ditch. And so, Mike, when you talked about the elevation of the fence being, 16 feet from my house,
No, 16 feet above your house.
above my house. But the activity at the nursery happens 4 feet above the bottom of the fence, because the fence is in the gully that they've dug.
The topo line that shows directly making contact with the fence in the drawing I'm looking says
We can
184.
go down there and I'll show you. No.
Does the fence exist there right now?
Fence does not exist. It stands at the top of before it drops down to the gully.
It follows the 184 topo line, right along.
It's a 10-foot fence that goes to a height of 194.
What's the elevation right here of this yard?
184.
The highest it gets is 190.
Right here. What is the height of this?
184.
Okay, 188. And what is the height of this fence?
194.
The top of the fence. I'm talking the bottom of the fence.
184.
Well,
10.
okay, so what's the difference? What's the difference?
10.
Between here, this is what? What is this?
188.
188, and this is 194?
At the top of the fence.
All right,
I'm sorry.
I don't-
What's happening over here
well-
is completely invisible from what's happening.
we're not talking about invisibility, we're talking about the impact to the residential character of the neighborhood, which is the pollution and the noise and the vibration. This is heavy, heavy equipment. It's a construction yard. Their application talks about the number of deliveries of materials. All of those materials are hauled out of there. They're brought in, they're loaded up on dump trucks, and they're brought out. The pollution alone from the diesel dump trucks is significant. And no fence is going to stop that. No fence is going to stop the noise of the beeping from the reversal of this equipment. I guess what I don't understand is, why can't this fence be in front of the hemlocks to give it a little bit more elevation? And I believe the zoning ordinance requires the fence, landscaping on both sides of the fence. Putting it behind the hemlocks does not allow for landscaping on Thayer's property to hide the fence from me. If you put it in front of the hemlocks, then your landscaping on the back of the fence is done. It just needs to be landscaped in front of it. And also, I would like the fence to go the entire length of from my property line all the way over here and connect with this fence. I'm not sure why, we've talked about that, and we've talked about aesthetics. Is it aesthetics for the nursery? I think that it will block more noise if it's continuous. And there's no sound material on this fence. I'd like to have sound material on this fence. In front of the hemlocks. If there's sound material here, why can't there be sound material here?
Okay.
And, well, is there any reason why the fence can't be in front of the hemlocks?
Well, the zoning states that the fence shall be set 15 feet in from the lot lines.
We're always talking about the law and the zoning. I can do this. Yes, you can do that by right. Like Mrs. King of the ZBA has said, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. We're looking for a better neighbor. I don't think it's unreasonable to put the fence in front of the hemlocks. And I think that really what might be helpful is a site visit. Because if you see where the fence is going, on my side of the hemlocks, then you have the ditch that goes to the stone wall. What kind of landscaping are we going to get on my side of the fence? Maybe the ditch will be removed and the water pumped into the drainage system. I don't know, because we talked about this yesterday. This is where all the water comes. So, can we consider having the fence be continuous?
All these things can be considered. You've made the suggestion. I want to hear from Mr. Oldfield once you've, I mean, we're not going to resolve this, and I'm going to suggest to the board that we have heard a lot of information and that we consider it for our next meeting on April 9th, because I think that being able to mull it over would be a useful thing to do.
Okay, could I just finish up?
Yes.
The applicant is applying to run a high-impact commercial business in a residential zone. And I believe sometimes when I hear the board talk, and certainly when the applicants talk, they're very, very concerned about their business. And I think that a better way to approach this is, let's have some concern about the people who bought their homes in a residential zone, and the zoning ordinance changed that, and the impact it has on the residents. We've talked about how this fence is going to help everybody. No one's going to it will remove the noise and the unsightliness of it. So I think we will come up with a plan, because we can apply the same thought process if all of this high-impact activity was handled here, in this corner, or in this corner, we'll put the fences there. So the people on Hillside won't be able to see this stuff, just as you told us here, that we won't be able to see it. So what's the difference if it's put here on the street? You have easier access to the road. I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't think these people, proponents of the nursery, they won't mind. They won't mind at all. That's all.
Okay. Mr. Oldfield, do you have something to add?
Yes, I'll keep it short and sweet. Josh Oldfield, 24 Forest Street. The location was selected because it's the furthest away from all the homes, except for my own.
Okay. Well, that was short, as you say. Mr. Johanning, we will hear you if you'd like.
I guess, Phil Johanning, 23 Parkwood Drive. One of the things, I don't remember with precision, and I don't have my map here, but I was wondering about the utility map. Is the septic system for the entire property identified on the utility map?
Public, no sewer.
No sewer?
No sewer.
I didn't realize that.
Well,
And would that be a utility that should be?
it should be identified, yeah.
Now, another thing, when Maggie and Josh started digging the trench that's supposed to aid in drainage, I called Mr. Prondak and I asked him what the dig safe number was, and he said he didn't have to give me that, but I was wondering, where are the gas lines? Are they identified on the map?
I think they should be.
No gas on the property.
Okay.
Okay.
Then, the last thing I wanted to say was, I remembered something that Pam Lepori said a long time ago at one of, I don't remember which meeting it was, that I thought was very interesting. And she had suggested that perhaps all of these industrial activities should be moved to an industrial area where they could be better accommodated by access, ingress and egress. And she had said to Maggie, wow, it would give you such an opportunity to grow your business. You have such a prestigious, let's say, name. People know you, they want you to serve them, but you're constrained on this little property. And so, you should move to a commercial area where serve more customers and get bigger and bigger. And I think Maggie said something like, well, what would I do with the property here? And Pam said, well, you could use it as a nursery. And I thought that was perfect. I don't think we should be concerned about anything but ensuring that we preserve the residential character of the neighborhood. And when people say, oh, they can start at 8, but if they can prove that they could, starting at 7 would be better for the business, then they can start at 7. I don't care what is good for the business when I hear reveille at 7. I have to get up at 4:30 every morning. I like to sleep till 9. And I don't want to hear a lot of stuff. And I think a residential neighborhood should be that way. Like John Rowe said, we really thought that we were living next to a nursery and we could listen to plants grow all day long. And like Pam said, maybe it should be a nursery. And that's what maybe it should be. If we can't find a fair solution for Pam, it isn't right to use Pam's land as a buffer for the nursery. And that's essentially what has happened here. The reason why there's such a thin line along Pam is because Pam has a lot of land and it creates its own buffer. But that land belongs to Pam, not to anyone else. So it shouldn't be used as a buffer for the nursery when it doesn't belong to the nursery. So if we can't find a fair solution for everybody, then perhaps the special permit should not be granted.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
We'll entertain a motion.
We
What?
need to continue before we,
I need you before you go
Why?
to that motion.
To do what?
1 minute. Or we should
All right,
continue
we're
to-
going to continue this hearing to April
9th.
9th at,
It's either 7:15 or 7:30, your choice.
what is happening?
You've got
7 o'clock, we have the condo.
We're going to do signs?
no, the scenic road is at 6:45, 7 o'clock, you've got the condo bylaw.
We're continuing the hearing.
I want to ask if you can change the date of the next hearing, because I'm going to be out of town on the 9th.
What does the board think?
Do we have a proposed date? I mean, are we proposing?
What
that
do we have?
Move it to the 23rd, or?
It would be the 16th, I guess.
16th, I have a conflict.
Yeah, I actually think I
already.
may have a conflict on the 16th, but I would have to double check it on my work calendar.
I don't expect that we would conclude on the 9th. We would have a discussion, but if you can be here, is there another, is on either side of the 9th or any of those days good?
No, I've got meetings all that week.
Technology today shouldn't be a problem.
What?
When I was away over the winter.
Well, we're not going to discuss it. We're going to see what we can do, but
I'd prefer to
What?
keep the date. I'd prefer to keep the date.
I think that we're going to have to keep the date. And you should talk to Mr. Dunn and Mr. Johanning about your issues.
I simply asked.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
We have attempted to accommodate you, but we don't think that we can. Sorry.
I would have a question about follow-on dates. The next logical date is the 23rd, but that is school vacation week. And I'm out of the country that week.
Well,
So I would ask the board to consider another date other than the 23rd for the date following the 9th.
well, okay, if we don't do, what, we could continue it from the 9th to a date further out. It might be useful to do that. What? The 10th? He's out of the country. You don't proceed without your lawyer.
No, the 9th we're meeting.
He's
We're
on
me-
16th. He's at
I'm out of the-
23rd. I'm saying April 10th.
Friday.
Friday?
No, thank you. Gonna end up divorced.
Ready? I do have one comment for you. before
Okay,
you-
now we're going to continue this hearing to the
9th.
9th at what time?
7:30 would make more sense. We've got the
Okay, at
condo
7,
article.
at 7:30.
Fine,
Okay, now, Mr. Clark?
good. At 6:45, you have a scenic road hearing for the Eustace Estate.
Yeah?
They want to open the wall on the western side of the gatehouse, where the original driveway is. I'm sorry?
6:45 when?
On the 9th.
On the 9th, okay.
April 9th. They have a scenic road hearing that is published in the paper, will be in again next week. They have a wall opening, there'll be 3 trees behind the wall, so they don't count towards the tree warden issue. The trees are marked, the wall is staked out.
We need
If you
to swing
could
by.
take a look at it before that next meeting, save yourself some time.
Why are they open?
Ed, you,
They're going to, that will be their main access to the property
Flip that.
for New England, historic New England. That will be the new main entrance. Instead of going through the archway, instead of having to go up the road where the people live, this is an entrance on their property in the front, be their new entrance.
All right, we'll go take a look.
Find
I'm
out
done.
later on.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Mike, you voted
Mike,
yes.
say aye, please.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Stay on both sides.